No worries. All right. Allegedly, we're live right now. Hello, everyone who's watching.
Hello.
Present or future. So far, people have actually liked the live stuff. I just haven't hit the upload button on a bunch of things. I have an upload button, and I have a bunch of videos in there, and I just have not hit the release. And I've just been procrastinating, to be honest. And I've got a finished script here. I don't even remember what the script is for. It's something to do with women. I don't know. Doesn't matter. So, but people like the live stuff.
Oh, that's too bad. Your monologues are really good.
Oh, they're really good because I sit on them for like months, right? Ruminate, because I argue with myself. I'll change my mind a whole bunch. Well, by the way, thank you for the compliment. I've got a bunch of monologues that are pretty punchy. I do want to, it's mostly just been the spring. Like I just had a new roof put up and just a lot of life getting in the way. I've got a bunch of plants in the greenhouse that just died because I didn't water. It's just stuff like that. But yes, the live stuff has been a lot of fun. And I figured today, since everyone's complaining, is it the first 5 minutes I'm not supposed to curse? I don't know how YouTube works. I'll curse at 5 minutes. How about that? There's a lot of itching bay about liberalism. So I figured we'd talk about it, tear it apart, steel man some arguments, look at it from both sides, and see what's going on. Because when I see everyone blaming the one thing, I start to think maybe there's something wrong with everybody and not so much the one thing. I see a scapegoat when I see one, I guess is what I'm saying. That's my suspicion. We're going to find out. But there's always merit, right? There's always merit to the arguments. So
yeah, well, and generally, like, reality is overdetermined. There are more conclusive, definitive explanations of factors that are responsible than there are, observable cases where those factors obtain. Blaming a single thing, like basically everything you'll observe in reality is epiphenomenal or multivariate in terms of cause.
Right.
It's fine to say that there are certain aspects of liberalism that may be at fault or maybe confounding variables or maybe factors, but definitively, if we just remove the one thing, are we going to have heaven on earth? And like,
exactly. I've got the suspicion that there is this utopianism. Right now, we're in the age of utopianism. Whenever you're in times where things are going fairly bad, or at least perceived to be bad, I think a lot of the perception of how bad things are is mostly social media, which has amplified a lot of people's, like, especially a racial awareness. Because I go out and it's just the same as it always was in the 90s for me. I mean, unless you live in a hotbed, but the hotbeds are where all the videos come out of, right? I mean, if you saw a heat map of the different like race memes and like racial stuff going out, it'd probably be just a couple of areas. And like you're saying, like
certain cities.
Yeah, and if you're saying like multivariable analysis, I'd probably say like 100% of the people involved are all just from single moms. Like, do we have a single mom crisis? Like, so which one do you want to blame?
Well, so the single mom crisis is interesting. Like, this is not necessarily related to liberalism, but oh god, I think it was either Jordan Peterson or Peter Boghossian talking about the factor that is the single biggest predictor of childhood abuse, whether it be physical or sexual. And it's like 9 times everything else combined.
Okay.
Which is the presence of a step parent in the home.
Right. Yep.
Which is not to say all step parents. It is, however, to say that it is the introduction of another person with a significant power differential, without strong bonds of kinship or prior social restraints, and single motherhood like is a factor in and of itself, but it is highly conducive to the introduction of step parents or boyfriends not only that not only have their own thing that they bring to the downsides of single motherhood, but further compound it by abuse, which intensifies antisocial trends in development. And like, again, not all step parents. Like, for instance, my dad, went off after he and my mom split, and his current fiance had, at the time that they got together, 4 kids, all minors, and he stepped in to be like, not quite a dad, like a new dad, but like, to be the positive beneficial force in their life. This exists, but on balance, it's not all of them. And especially if if you're looking at a community that is subject to a lot of abuse in the development of cultural problems and antisocial cultural norms, within that group, it's going your exposures are basically all negative.
I'm gonna masterfully weave this back in, because power without kinship is actually a humongous factor of why a lot of people seem to hate liberalism, because they'll end up having these people who are very powerful over them, but they feel like they're not part of their group. There's a certain despondency that occurs. By the way, this happens on every side. One of the biggest flaws of, let's say, the white nationalists is they don't listen to the black nationalists, because most of their complaints are actually very similar, and we could probably actually hash out a deal.
Their perspectives are highly synergistic. Like, they should be partners.
Yeah, they probably would be too. I think people will stop them from becoming partners too often. But anyways, there's that Ryan, the Canadian comedian who now lives in New York.
Oh, Ryan Long. Ryan Long, yeah, the Ryan Long thing of like the racist and the woke, and they agree about virtually everything.
Well, and I've talked with people about this too, and I'm not the problem with the white nationalists and the black nationalists. So if, by the way, the reason why we're talking about this on a stream about liberalism is because these are two camps that are under the American auspices, right? These are the American camps that are purportedly fighting each other all the time. So I'm taking the most extreme example of Americans that hate each other and just shoving them in a room and seeing if they can hash this out. I think they probably could, because a lot of what they want, they only dislike the other one's position because of just a gut reaction, right? If they actually listen to the other one out, like black people in Atlanta wanted to make a black city in Georgia, like everyone's like, oh, this sucks, boo boo. I was like, that's great, go for it, do it. Like, as long as it's not under like taking a lot of taxpayer money. If they wanted to fundraise for it, and I was like, yeah, that'd probably actually be really good, because then. And when they say they want their own community policing, I didn't outright reject that either, because I'm like, I wouldn't want like what I would see to be a foreign force policing. And yeah, I might do a way worse job and I have no training, but it's like, then you at least have responsibility, because we have this mismatch of responsibility and kinship about who is in charge of who. And it creates this sense of, it makes everybody feel like a bastard. It makes everybody feel like a stepchild.
Yeah.
Like, we're all stepchilds of the American empire at the moment.
Yeah. And there's a similar thing that happened relatively recently. I can't remember the name of the township in, I believe, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, where there was an almost exclusively white community that wanted to separate and become its own township with its own laws and stuff like that.
It was called like St. George's or something like that. I remember it sounding had like a very Englishy name, so which I thought was funny.
Yeah, and there was kind of an intensive reaction around it. And it's like, what you're looking at in in sort of my compiling my thinking documents, the most ambiguous line I have in here is nations are necessary. What is a nation?
Right.
And a nation is a sort of over tribe. Particularly like circa 2019, 2020, it was, very popular to be against tribalism without necessarily having a deep dive into what that means. Humans, just in the same way that we are religious animals, are also tribal animals. And tribe is your community of fellow feeling and belonging, whether it be based on lineage, common association or interest, long-time association, a heritage association, et cetera, et cetera. Humans are always going to form tribes. I'm going to be, in the tribe of whatever city or municipality I happen to live in. I'm going to be by choice, a member of the War Machine player tribe. I'm going to be a member of my family tribe, whether I like it or not. And they have feelings and obligations toward me, and I toward them. And these tribes are all through an interrelation, a web of interrelationships belonging to greater tribes. Our people, our nation, as sort of the over tribe of all of us. And you can't have a beneficial social relationship with somebody who hates you or wants to exploit you.
And I think that's what people, when they talk about multiculturalism, is what they're talking about. I actually had a phone call with another Lotus Eater fan who's American, and she was pretty much like wondering what people mean by multiculturalism. And I joked at her, like, okay, so we're going to tell Chinatown and Little Italy to pack it up and go home. Is that what we mean? I was like, what is is it multiculturalism or is it anti-culturalism? ANTE, like these cultures just cannot live together, because you can have multiple cultures. That actually happens all the time, and especially in American history, it's constantly happened. And I think part of the rose-colored glasses that people have about times right now is they forget that, like, the nation of America. I think I got into an argument about homogeneity. Like, what does homogeneity mean? And they'll say like genetic homogeneity. I was like, well, how much? And that's my anti-BS question is always, well, how much? Or like, tell me what particularly. So if they say like, well, America's a Christian nation, I'm like, well, what kind of Christian? And then I like watch them all fight. And I was like, okay, because if we want to make a nation that's run by Freemasons, I'm happy to do that. I mean, that's your terms are acceptable. If you want to make America the way it used to be, then which religions are we going to delete? Because America invented religions, denominations, and all this stuff. If you want to say like genetically we have to be homogeneous to be in the same tribe, I'm wondering like, okay, which ones are acceptable? Because the white race has had scope creep for a while. Like, I think 50 years ago, if you said that Russians were considered of the normal white race, then people would freak out. Before that, it was like Italians. Before that, it was in Eastern Europeans. I think the original Benjamin Franklin classification was just like Englishmen and like some French. I forget. It was a pretty small group. So I was like, it's weird because you have to erase all of the actual ethnic boundaries to make this utopian ethnic group for America that the white nationalists will see as white. You have to almost just glaze over tons of history. Like the fact that tons of Italian immigrants came here and quite destabilized entire cities, and almost descended the Americans into a narco war.
Right. Well, that's ethnicity and genetic lineage is kind of a proxy for whether you belong to the tribe or not.
Right.
Because almost every European state is an ethno state, or at least, on paper was at one point or another. Just to give an example, I don't think, really any, like, nobody's going to deny that Calvin Robinson is English.
Right. Except for the very hardliners.
Right. But the reason for that is, like you say, arguing about percentage, but it's really a matter of, does he want to belong to the tribe? Does he feel like he belongs to the tribe, honors all his duties and obligations, and feels he has nowhere else to go to experience the same level of kinship, et cetera, et cetera. Like, the proxy factor for genetic lineage is, is it like culturally embedded into you? You were born into this, you were raised in this. These are the values that are so ubiquitous to them. They're like oxygen. You can't imagine living without them. You go into the midst of another tribe and they recognize you as being from this tribe, stuff like that.
We tend to focus. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
There's internal split loyalties, by the way, too. I think this is, why you get black supremacists and white supremacists agreeing about many things is, the sort of keystone of their agreement is separatism, actually.
Yes. I would say
because they both have a creation of a tribal super identity which is exclusive of the other.
Well, actually, I'm going to push back a little.
And they're like, you live over there, I live over here, but we don't intermix because we don't have a shared conception of, American, we don't have an intersection of fellow feeling aside from maybe something like common defense. And there's also, I think at the end of it, this is one of the major reasons for Jewish skepticism in many Western countries is, Jews will live in America, be Americans, like all the things that apply to Calvin Robinson, but American. But they also have another overtribe, which many of them, but not all of them, consider themselves participatory in, which is the Jewish tribe. It's a religion, it's a people, and it's a tribe. And people underrate the importance of the tribe is the top category for, defining like how these people self-understand.
And I'll go ahead and jump in. The pushback I'll give to you is that unfortunately the tribe of like the black nationalists is they actually don't want to be left alone. They seem to want a lot of our stuff. And before they,
that was the nub of the court battle around St. George's or whatever it was, the Baton Rouge suburb, is essentially, are you entitled to access to white people?
I don't know what the Greek word for, I know the Greek word for come and take it is molon labe, right? The Greek phrase. I wonder what the Greek phrase for go ahead and take it, because that's kind of just how it is. Like, fine, you want it, go ahead and take it. You want the farm, take it. It's like, it's not actually a lot of fun to maintain this. And what I would say though, to wrap up I think to wrap up in a bow, what makes you part of the American tribe, right? So the ethno-statist, sort of ethnocentric Europeans don't understand this. They don't understand, and they have trouble with this, right? They have no pressure valve for the Calvin Robinsons when they actually start to buckle down and say, who are we as a people? We're defined as those who've had heritage here. It's like, oh shoot, that means Calvin Robinson's got to get on the boat. And there's going to be a fight over that. And a lot of people are going to say, I'm disgusted by this action. It's obviously unjust. What I would say, what makes you a part of a people, or even like British versus English, right? Like the cohort. America is entirely a cohort. There's no indigenously declared people here. People say, like, I've lived here for 400 years. You ask them who lived there before you, and then you go over to those people and ask who lived here before you, and it's a bunch of different tribes. I think the whole indigenous argument is a bunch of bullcrap, and I think it's a terrible thing to focus on because it's so easy to scrutinize, and it's such a trap that indigeneity is just a useless thing. I throw it out. Because
I'll give you a counter example, but I want to hear where this is going.
No, sure. What makes you actually a part of the tribe in America? Because we're in all cohorts. What makes you part of the tribe in America is that you submit. You submit yourself to be an American. Like, American is not
an American Ummah.
Well, it's. Well, I don't know what an Ummah. What's an Ummah? Is that a?
Oh, that's Islam, the sort of over identity of those who submit.
More or less, yeah. So it is about submission, because if you said, okay, Ben, let's say Ben Shapiro, he's the biggest Zionist that I know of. He's very popular. He's very annoying. and to everybody who's an American statist, like America First person, right? America First was actually like a spit right in his eye, because America First says, who do you put first? Right? My soul belongs to Jesus Christ. I think everyone's kind of okay with that. However, my body belongs to America if it's necessary to like go towards its defense. And then to lesser extents, more and more, to the point where it's like, are you willing to volunteer, give up your time? Are you willing to give your oath of loyalty, not of your soul, but of your body and your property, to defending America? Are you willing to give up your culture? Like rinsing it. We don't ask you to like throw your culture away, like at home. Like I know a lot of Japanese families who came to America and they still have little shrines in their house. But they're part of it is like speaking American, right? That whole like speak American part. That's why the Sri Thanadar guy like pissed everybody off the moment he opened his mouth. Like he's been in America for like 50 years and he sounds like he just got off the boat. I'm like, you've put zero effort into Americanizing yourself. It's trashy. It's considered trashy. My dad is a foreigner, and he got on board with the American thing very quickly. That's why Asians have no problem. Asians are just like sitting here watching, like listening to white supremacists and like, wondering if they're talking about us. And they almost never are, because like Asians are considered, we're considered good fodder to like beat up other ethnicities and other races whenever they want. I'm like, look, these guys just got to America and look how great they're doing. They just came from communism or something like that. And it's like their heritage and what they've been given, they start from nothing and they're doing great in the universities. And then we do too good in the universities and they get upset. But the fact is we submit ourselves to the American identity first. Like if you want to go and do a Karate Kid and just tell Mr. Miyagi has to go back to Japan, like I don't think most Americans are going to stand for that. There's a certain level of like, yes, you will wave the flag, you will pledge allegiance to the flag, you will stand for the anthem, you will pay the proper respect, you'll go and make your pilgrimage to Washington D.C. at some point in your life. You will go to 4th of July. You will do the American activities. You do the pro-American things that make you part of the tribe, and you will be consistent in your actions and your words towards American values, which is how you can have people who are American indigenous, who are not American. Like they're a bunch of, like, let's say a bunch of communists and they hate America. And I like to like point this out to the ethnocentrists and the indigenous people is like the indigenous white American types is like half of your tribe is trying to destroy this country. You guys realize that your blood seems to have is kind of a coin flip of whether or not you're actually helping this country or not. And they're actively trying to destroy it. So it's like your blood is not sufficient and only to do this. There's more to it. And the assumption that their blood is sufficient to be American is actually opens up the door for very un-American ideologies to break in.
Right. What my sort of counterpoint on indigeneity is like, okay, well, if they're not indigenous, the whole thing is like historically contingent and mediated. Like if you make any serious study of history, every piece of property in existence or its contributing factors, its land, etc., have been subject to theft, expropriation, preemption. Like,
yeah,
there's no sense going on about land acknowledgements and stuff like that. Because it's part of the human condition, even prior to the Canadians who are rather fond of them. These tribes warred.
Yes.
And they settled their boundaries by conquest. And the culture and the people or tribe that you belong to is in fact historically mediated and contingent. It is not eternal. It is a function of the creation of a community of fellow feeling. When you ask about who is indigenous, the question I like to go to is where else are they supposed to be from?
Right. Indigenous is like independently genius, right? Like this is where these people are found.
Yeah. Where else are Afrikaners supposed to be found? Where else is, Calvin Robinson supposed to be found? Like he's Caribbean descended, but he's clearly not a product of the Caribbean.
Well, and I would actually say that like there's a difference in I guess what I was saying before is like this claim to genetic originality or something like that, some genetic exception towards the land. Whereas you were kind of saying that where else can you find these people? Like what other home do they have? Right? Like they have no other place where they're from. And I would also say like, yeah, it's definitely culturally mediated of who conquers. Like if I was going to do like the super based land acknowledgement, I'd be like, I'd like to acknowledge my ancestors on my mother's side, the Jones clan, who came across and conquered this region from the who'd be that region of Kansas? I think it would be the oh gosh, it starts with a K. Is it Kiowa? I don't know. I don't have to know from whichever tribe whose name I no longer have to know because they no longer run this place. I would like to thank my mother's ancestors.
Well, this is one of the weird things about returning to liberalism, and this is modern liberalism, not necessarily classical liberalism, is the recognition of settling disputes by violence as legitimate. The important thing to understand is it is a last resort, not a first resort. But it is
how much you drink,
but it is like all settled boundaries. All the like we are here, you guys are over there.
Yeah.
are more or less either settled by past violence or implicitly by recognition that there will be violence if you try and transgress this, and that's legitimate.
Well,
cue the Starship Troopers thing of tell that to the city fathers of Hiroshima.
Right, and all
force
authority
has settled more disputes than any other method in the history of
And that's part of being an American too, is that you have to submit that the state has the not monopoly but the final say on violence. Like if you and I have a fist fight at the bar, that's between you and me. But if it wants to, if the state decides it, that will escalate further into possibly more violence, right? Of them like locking us away. And we have to submit to that. You can't be an outlaw American. I don't know if you can be an outlaw American unless you are. I mean, even a lot of the outlaws would surrender themselves. They would be an outlaw for a purpose, like the most noble ones, right? Like the ones who would fight off banking, like Wells Fargo carriages and whatnot. I think there was the one famous example of a guy who said, "Okay, go ahead and pay your mortgage. Here's a bunch of money, old lady. Go ahead and pay your mortgage, but make sure you get a receipt." And then they that's the story. They then laid waste to the carriage that picked up the money. So she has the receipt, so her land is hers now, but they get to take the money back that they gave her. So the submission to violence and the understanding that the state has the final say on violence is actually a big part of it. Whether that violence comes in the form of like a local judge and a lynch mob, or it comes to what this is why the right actually is very much pro-law, even if they break the law, even justly. They're like, yeah, you're gonna submit to the whatever. If there was some person that did an awful thing to an awful person, let's say someone on the right did the unspeakable bad thing to a bad person on the left, I want to make that person me. Let's say I had a debate against Vosh, and I just like, you know what? I'm tired of this. These are fighting words, and I just settled it like they used to. I would, as a person on the right and an American, I would hand my wrists over to the sheriff and say like, all right, well, I had a fun run. Was it worth it or not? Like, and it's their right to say why, Gary, why, and then just let me go. Or not.
An interesting thing, one of the first cases of hate speech jurisprudence in the United States came down to what is called fighting words.
Yeah.
And it was specifically calling another American a Nazi. It's like, oh, well, you should have expected violence as a response.
Well, exactly. Well, the Nazi is the only N word that actually results in violence to the person who's called that. Like, it actually is a dangerous word to be called, or at least it used to be until it got overused. Right? Thank God for that. I mean, that's the worst way it could possibly have been nullified. But yeah, like the Americans are fairly independent minded about settling disputes, but you at the end you do have to submit. And the problem is that these people who want to reform the system through extra judicial or extra lawful means, whether that before the show when you were talking about people who decide that the Constitution can be interpreted, right? Like if they can just say, well, that means different things now that times are different.
I'm going to play language games, and I'm going to play language games, and I am going to exploit the living Constitution thing to choose that the words say whatever I want them to say, regardless of what they plainly say.
It's very much being an American is a little bit like going to someone else's house for board game night and then respecting the rules, even if the rules are kind of bullcrap. Yep. Like you might try to like change it. Or have a physical altercation to try and do it, but like to be an American, you do have to submit yourself to the American system to some extent, which is why the left has a monopoly on extrajudicial and extra system violence, and I hope they keep that monopoly because frankly, it makes them look really, really bad. It makes it's not convincing. And they jump on it whenever the right. Oddly enough, the best police of the right is actually the left. The right's behavior is like usually pretty good. They'll even speak in code if they force them to, so they don't say things explicitly.
Right. Well, this is the recent Tory party statement about like our greatest essential threat is labor. labor not being weak or labor not existing. Is we just get elected on them being shitters.
Oh yeah, absolutely. No, yeah. Well, that's the fake uniparty, right? Like the uniparty pretends it's fighting itself, but the people talk about the founding fathers and they talk about liberalism. They talk about classical liberalism. I noticed that you mentioned that there's a modern liberalism and there's a classical liberalism. Is the classical liberalism that of our founding fathers? Like, if you read the Federalist paper, am I going to get a nice course on liberalism?
So if you read the Federalist Papers, maybe Anti-Federalist Papers, definitely yes. I went through the Federalist Papers actually relatively recently. They vary in readability. Hamilton is easily the most readable, and when it switches to Jay, you want to die. Fortunately, Hamilton wrote most of them, but to answer the question, part of why my notes included the Declaration of Independence, I'd like to actually read the first 2 paragraphs of this, if that's all right. And I also have in the note stock, Carl Benjamin's 10 now false assumptions of liberalism.
Yeah,
so we can consult that as we go through if we feel is necessary. But I think the words stand on their own for establishing sort of what the framework was. So the unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. Oh yeah.
Just pop it up. Feel free. I've lost my tab. I have 105 tabs open, so I'm useless.
Okay, so I got that shared now.
Yeah, the funny thing you're going to get to though is that you've got multiple funhouse mirrors going at the same time, including like back then about who has written what. Remember that our union was made through disunity and a compromise of all that disunity, which makes a thing that's completely different. Like you got person who wants outcome A and outcome B, you're going to get outcome C. Outcome C is just the least painful of of all 3.
I have to pop off for a second. The dogs are losing their mind.
Oh, okay. No worries. All right. Well, Alex Cosma's dogs are losing their mind. Oh, here, I have it to the stage here. Let's just be self-evident. Yeah. So the second paragraph here, I wish I could. Oh, can I mark it? No, I cannot. Okay. The second paragraph here, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. This has been part of that living document BS that you get from modern people, is they will say all men are created equal versus all men are equal. These guys a lot of them were lawyers and even businessmen, even myself. I went ahead and shared your screen. Thank you so much for putting that up there. The second paragraph there, I see people who try to play word games, which, by the way, to reiterate, if you have a nation that's founded on laws versus whatever saying somebody said, right? If you have a king, it's just whatever the king says because God chose the king and the king is just going to say it, right? He's the sovereign who just declares the exception. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, right? Men are created equal here. The funny thing about the founding fathers was that they're actually kind of similar to what we have now. I think I called Trump and Elon and the rest of the cohort as the refounding fathers because they actually are kind of similar in that Benjamin Franklin was a self-made man who idolized the British monarchy and then quickly hated them. The man was like, he dropped out in the 2nd grade, became an absolute hustler. He probably
he was also a British spy during the war.
Oh, was he?
Yeah.
Oh, which war? Which war?
The Revolutionary War.
Was he providing
Agent 59 or something?
Was he providing intel to the British?
Yeah.
What a bastard! He's playing both sides. He always comes out on top.
I forget when this came out. It was relatively recent history. But the British admitted, Benjamin Franklin was a foreign spy for us.
That's too funny. That's hilarious. Well,
I mean, the refounding fathers thing is like totally accurate. I mean, I've heard Scott Adams make the analogy before, which is funny because he's the chief argument, against argument by analogy guy. But there's something to it.
Well, it's okay to say that a situation is fulfilling the same functions as it was before. Like, it's okay to say that Windows 11 is fulfilling the same functions as Windows 10, plus a few other things. Yeah, all men are created equal. Obviously, all men are not equal. They're created equal, as in no royal titles.
Yeah.
Right. And when you're created equal, you are a worthless baby who needs to be taken care of. The rest of your life is determined by men who are become unequal by the ebbs and flows of life. Right.
Yeah.
So
where I actually wanted to start is the first one, because I feel like this is probably it sets the tone in some very important ways.
It's the breakup letter.
And then the second paragraph sort of gets into what we might call, where we might start to identify the false assumptions of liberalism and sort of the fallow ground which formed modern liberalism, as sort of this fruit matures.
All right, let's go for
the unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. Interesting capitalization there, by the way. When, in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume... Okay, so dissolve the political bands which have connected them to another, recognizes a variety of dimensions of shared identity and belonging to a community of fellow feeling. Essentially you have English on one side of the sea and English on the other. And they now have a sense of apartness, which demands that they dissolve it because of abuse. And to assume among the powers of the earth the separate equal station which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. Essentially, separation from your tribe requires real grievance. In pre-revolutionary America, the term innovation, in sort of the English at the time, was considered a bit of a bad word because it means you were doing something which had not been done and which oughtn't be done.
Oh, right. Yeah. That's a very English thing to do. It must be proper.
Very, very important to them in their cultural self-understanding to establish we're not just doing this for the sake of it or because we can. We are doing this, like with cause.
Right.
That the agreement has been broken beforehand. And it is an agreement, by the time of the revolution, that basically none of them were party to the original formation of.
Sorry, one second. I'm just putting a chat in. I'm encouraging people to argue. Argument is great. I believe that argument creates consciousness, and conflict creates eventual unity. Like two stones rubbing against each other eventually form mirror images of themselves. Until one maybe is only left, such as it is. The people dissolving their bonds, right? Like leaving the English. I use this to push against.
Really mad, by the way, when I don't always say it, but I get really mad internally when people tell me that they broke their relationship with their brother or sister or father or whoever, because of a trifling slight. Like I do genuinely get mad and what the by John V. But I do get like, bro, you're breaking something deep over something shallow.
Right.
What are you doing?
I think what had happened with the founding fathers is I think people underestimate personal relationships when it comes to this. I do remember that Benjamin Franklin had been admonished for the Boston Tea Party and had pretty much come back to the Congress of the United States and said, yeah, I'm going to use my my journalism machine to go ahead and start fomenting war, along with all the the American Revolution was quite a bit of propaganda war in large parts, right? It was blowing things out of proportion, such as the Boston Massacre, which was more or less people throwing rocks at soldiers until the soldiers panicked, and in my opinion, panicked and shot them, or were just incensed and then shot them. I think 9 people died. I forget exactly the number of people have died at the Boston Massacre, but it was tatted over. It showed that what it showed the colonists, whether it was true or not, is that the British thought of them as less than human and worth to put into someone to be shot if they're not behaving. Right? That's the pretense of how
that you could readily characterize it as these people believe that we're less than human because we live on the interpretive layer.
Correct. Well, yeah, exactly. The perception of it was. That's why it was a newspaper war. If you had the Americans and the British actually sit down and talk it out, you'd probably have more commonality than anything else. However, it doesn't make a lot of sense. I think a lot of the founding fathers realized that it doesn't make a lot of sense for England to run us because there were in my opinion, there was a lot of treaties with the natives, which were probably not such a great idea. Like governing from a continent away in the 1700s is going to lead to an extremely slow government. And if they're of the mind of be cautious, walk slowly, don't do things that are untoward, that's not the American way. Americans are pretty rapacious. They will just take what they want if you're not behaving properly. The patience of the American people is pretty short. It's actually very short. I remember in the 2015 Baltimore riots, some nice old lady at the office was just, and this is liberal Maryland, was just saying like, I wish the National Guard would just come over and shoot them. I was like, oh my gosh, that's not a British thing to say or do. However, that is the American thing to say or do. That's just American. That's if you don't submit to the American like UMA, as you'd said, we don't have a lot of patience for it. However, there's been a lot of devices used to stretch the patience of the American people for a while. I think it's kind of funny that people will blame wokeism for a lot of stuff. I think wokeism is not. I'm not as mad about it as other people are, but I do see that what it's doing is it actually has to appeal to the American desire for equality and that people are created equal, like men are created equal. Because if you say there's a systemic pushback on the opportunities that you can have in this country, all Americans actually become incensed at that. Now, do all Americans believe that? That depends on that strength of the interpretive layer. Like the difference between the American Revolution and actually a wokeist revolution is the quality of propaganda. If I want to be cynical, which I sometimes am.
I'll give you maybe it's not a rebuff or a counterpoint, but more, you're right that wokeism parasitizes on aspects of liberalism. And, if we get further into the Declaration of Independence, like the second paragraph really lays out sort of some of the implicit assumptions about human being, the nature of reality, political bonds, etc., that it is derived very heavily from sort of the English liberal tradition. The wokeism thing is, it does parasitize, and the way I've always characterized it is, liberalism is a framework for society and sort of unique, at least in the 18th century, between societies, but as the following 200 years revealed, is like it's cancer prone. It's not necessarily bad in and of itself, but it is vulnerable to producing structures which destroy it or attempt to destroy it.
Well, and this cancer is something this cancer is something we've seen before, actually, because you end up having the law and order side of Anglo culture, of the English type of culture, versus the moral crusades that they tend to go on, which will then like trounce the legal side. So the moral crusade will then justify flaunting the law, whether it's interpretive, whether it's just pure defiance, whether it's subverting it, like letting an illegal alien out of the back of your courtroom to run away from the ICE agents. That's very much along the vein. They will have these oscillations. So that's why I kind of one of my longer one of my longer observations is I just don't think that the English culture is coherent enough to actually sustain itself unless it has a king to interpret law. However, we have this liberalism right now, which is a rule of law, like starting from this Declaration of Independence, which is a declaration of who we are. Essentially, this is our breakup letter from England, and also a declaration of what we believe as one America, right? Which, by the way, I don't. The Declaration of Independence to me is also a propaganda document to an extent, is because if you understand American history, declaring ourselves as one people is kind of insane.
Yeah,
because we were ready to throw down pretty much immediately after the war was over, and before so. But we had to create a sense of unity. We had to create and to create a sense of unity, you have to have one bad guy, which is the British.
Right.
Yeah. Anyways.
Well, yeah, and that's why, like, the kingdoms of Mercia and all these other, like, the England, like the 7 kingdoms of England, why within 2 generations of Alfred the Great they were able to have a king of the English is the enemy of the Danes gave them common cause and common struggle, where they began to associate and like create a shared identity through shared struggle.
Yeah, they've used that before to unify people. I wonder if the American founders, I mean, that's just an observation of just human nature.
Yeah. So I'll give you a split here, because the Constitution, like I said, or the Declaration of Independence rather, had to present, and you're right about the aspects of it as a propaganda piece, but in order to make their case in a way which would be recognizable both to their countrymen and to the people with whom they were severing bonds. And the American Revolution was a controversy in the time in England. It was a relatively small war for the people, like, so much so that it was by and large not noticed in the way other military conflicts like the Napoleonic Wars were. And that many British were sympathetic. Is they had to clearly articulate, okay, here's an innovation that's unfair. Here's an innovation that's unfair. Here's something that's violating our shared customs. Here's something that's violating our shared customs. We should be able to split. It has to be intensely articulate and rationalistic. And I think one of the greatest strengths of the English people and of English descended cultures is a certain studied degree of intellectual laziness. Like,
you don't think about it
don't think about it too hard. Like, just get the thing done, because like we can intellectualize, we can create metaphysical systems, etc. But at the end of the day, there's a rock that needs to come out of the field, no matter how we intellectualize it. It's like, don't worry about it too much as long as we move the rock. And anytime you get English speaking people's intellectualizing to the nth degree how to move a rock, things can get a little weird.
That's why.
And I mean, it's been observed, like the most intellectualizing people on earth arguably are the Germans. And it's really interesting. Eric Vogelin's autobiographical reflections, he reflects on his time as a Carnegie Foundation fellow in the United States, coming over here to study, born in Cologne, raised in Austria, and describing sort of the philosophical climate he grew up in, and moving to the United States to study here. He said, I encountered things like Scottish common sense philosophy and sort of the legal philosophical tradition of the Supreme Court, and the emphasis placed on common sense and is it sensible?
Right.
And sensibility being a test for, let's not worry about it too much. And he said, like, yeah, all the grand neo-Kantian like debates of my homeland simply washed off. They did not matter anymore once I experienced, like, oh, people don't have to obsess in minute press stitching details about how to live.
That's why I kind of think about the conservatives that you see on Twitter. There's a lot of them I just unfollowed and frankly just muted because they're not saying anything interesting, and their argumentation is not sensible, right? Sense as in we sense it. It's you can see it, right? Because they say like, well, you know, the people from this country, you know, they're inferior. As soon as they see like a counter example to that, or see it in the preponderance, like a lot of it, like whatever people just see as in a sense, is what they're going to believe. So the focus on argumentation is actually pretty stupid. The focus on inundation of media is actually much better, like show you lots of examples of it. But then you just become one of those Twitter accounts that just spews tons of videos and asks like, hey, what do you think of this? But most of the American people are not on Twitter, right? So this online discourse, and by the way, thank God for the mental health of the American people. The online discourse is not sensible in that most people don't sense it. The online discourse is out of a sensory layer. It is intellectualized inherently. Now, video is pretty good. Video does a pretty good job of bringing people into the sensory part of it. But most people who you talk to in America are going to think a lot of these intellectualized conversations, whether they're leftist or rightist, are just dumb. And they're just not going to care, and they're going to lose interest after a second. Like it's kind of funny to see the right transforming into the group that has the memes that have tons of words on them. Like I have to read a bunch of word salad about, I don't know, tons of philosophy and tons of history, and I'm like, I don't care, dude. It's like, and that's kind of actually where I live. I live in that area. Like I try to stay in touch with that area, but I have enough understanding of history and how it makes us to care about this stuff, because the Declaration of Independence is kind of built into the American values. And this is, I guess what I want to ask is, does any type of liberalism actually matter except for American liberalism to Americans? Like, I want to start branding stuff away from Europe because their minds are so different than the Americans that it's kind of tempting for me to say like, yeah, that's great. This philosophy is great. It'll just wash like water off a duck's back to an American. Like they just won't even care.
I would say yes. You know, one of the obvious big splits. I'm gonna stop sharing because I think we're probably done with the declaration.
Oh yeah, sure. Aw.
One of the obvious big splits is between English and French liberalism. You know, because French liberalism tends to be the much more idealistic and you know, supremacy of the mind's eye kind of thing.
It was pre-communism, it sounded like.
Yeah, pretty much. Versus English liberalism, which is mostly the result of non-liberal English people settling disputes about, you know, what they are entitled to or what their obligations are, that transforms into a list of rights and ideas about who has rights to what and obligations to what. In that English liberalism was created sensibly, and then essentially the continentals, who have no tangible history of the experiences that the English had, get the broad ideas, suck them into their own language vortex, and then rationalize them like crazy. And I think the timeline on liberal thinkers also backs this up, that this was the flow of information. So it's the difference between an emergent philosophy, you know, that's the result of a life being lived, versus a created philosophy that is dictating how life should be lived prior to living any of it. And it's not that we have to follow what either of them say. It's important to recognize that that's a crucial distinction in how human beings can operate. I heard Ed Dutton talking about this recently. He called it rank concession syndrome. Essentially, when people follow social prestige or are forced to yield social prestige for a set of new ideas, they adopt the forms of the new set of ideas that they had to yield prestige to and sort of ape it in a cargo cultish way to re-attain social prestige, but they don't necessarily understand it or like have it
like,
deep down in their chests.
Like modern liberalism is 100% social climbing is bullshit. By the way, we're way beyond the time limit, so I'm going to curse profusely. It's and then because none of them actually follow it, right? Like what you see when what people actually do speaks a lot, right? That's why I think both you and I both hate the declarative, the professorial virtue that you get in like modern Christianity or anything like that. Like you get the kind of bullshit of if I say something, it makes me good, versus if I do something. Like so my dad, by the way, I will toot my dad's horn. He is a proper Christian. He actually brought people into the house that were not family members. They were part of the church, and the church is your family. That's the thing, is you're subsuming you're belonging to the church. So he brought them in and actually like fed them, clothed them, brought them into a better school district from inner city Baltimore. Now, both of them turn out to be scumbags. That's all right. That's fine. We give people a chance. We do our part and we get bit. That's all right. And, but they both have better lives than they would have otherwise. Right. So we just don't relate with them anymore. That's fine. But like people do like the Martha's Vineyard thing was an amazing episode of hypocrisy. Like, do you actually live the philosophy you say? Like, are you actually a sanctuary city, or do you just like to say it? Do you actually want the things that you profess to think are correct? Like, do you want to live in the world where your morals are righteous and held as sacred? Or do you simply want to say that you are, right? Simply want to say it. And I think, and to the credit of the Americans, both left and right hate that stuff. That's why it was so effective. That's why it was so absolutely effective, the Martha's Vineyard thing, is because it showed the left as well as the right that these people are absolute hypocrites. And they just want to use it to social climate parties. There's a lack of... And that's also a reason, by the way, why America is winning the global culture war, is because the Americans do want some level of... what do you call it? What does Nerdrotic call it? It's the age of... It's basically being genuine. Right. Are you genuine?
Yeah. Authenticity. Yeah.
Authentic. That's right. Age of authenticity. Like, are you authentic? Do you? So these high-minded ideals that you get from the French Revolution, to me, represent something that people don't actually want, because everybody who creates this thing decides that they're an exception to this rule they've made. Just like Joseph Stalin wasn't exactly living off of, bread and pigeon meat like everybody else, or worse. Nor having his speech combed through by the Gestapo, or not Gestapo. That's a different left-leaning regime. Was it the Stasi, or the secret police of Russia? The American liberalism actually did English liberalism actually live up to it? Did they actually become the liberals they decide they wanted to be?
Okay, so I noticed a chat about both sidesism. And
Liberalism is very active. Thank you for being
I want
active,
to address that real quick because this ties into it. Both the rank concession syndrome and saying the thing that is popular because it is going to get you a beneficial social reaction, and not being especially concerned about truth value is not a sides-based issue. If the right, for instance, is in fact coming to cultural ascendancy, you will have to deal with hangers-on, people who exercise a prestige-based epistemology. Not, is it true out in the world? Can I deduce the truth or falsity of a statement from its logical propositions? Okay, let's observe reality. Does this hold up, etc.? You will have to live with people who join your movement because you are saying the good words without being the good man. And that these prestige-based epistemologists have a strong tendency to radicalize. This is part of why the left has become so intellectually pathetic,
Yeah.
Is that they replace thinkers and doers with word sayers.
And this is the problem, is that the left doesn't actually have an ideal of what the good life is, as Stelios will probably talk about at some point. Like, what is the good life for a leftist other than professations and deprivations, right? You deprive yourself of things, then you say the right words. Whereas the right, it's like, do you have a family? Do you have a business? Are you are you a taxpayer? That's the most like boomer thing ever, but it is true. Like, are you a net contributor to the by the way, to the credit of the right, saying that, hey, are you a taxpayer? And that's being a thing of prestige, is saying, are you putting money into the common pot for everyone's benefit? Which, by the way, it's crazy. I love America because it's a place of paradoxes, and it's got left turns and right turns everywhere, that you find out that the other side is actually coded into you. And I start to see this yin yang, where a drop of the other side is actually not only a part of you, but is actually a focal point in a lot of ways. Is that the right coded people actually have a lot of left coded stuff in them, which makes it easy to subvert, but it also means that you get the benefits of both, which I like. Yes, are you putting money into the common pot? Do you go to church? Like, are you the greatest American I've ever met personally was a guy named Dr. Wong. And he says that, by the way, submitting to the American culture, he pronounces his own name Dr. Wang. I know that's not the actual Chinese pronunciation, but it is how it's spelled in American. So he calls himself Dr. Wang, which I thought was funny. And he's like, so he's an eye doctor. He's a PhD in laser physics, as well as being a ophthalmologist, which means you're a general practitioner and you made a specialty. So this guy's got like probably 2 or 3 doctorate level degrees, and he floats a church on the money he makes. Like, he charges a lot for eye surgery. He gave me my eye surgery. He lives it. He absolutely gives money back in. He actually had a movie made. Now, admittedly, it was about himself. It was called The Gift of Sight, which is the funniest. Which, by the way, is the most American thing, is to be so self-aggrandizing. He's like, yes, I am great, but I'm great for a better purpose. It's actually the core of what America's exceptionality is that, yes, I am awesome, but I'm awesome because I'm an American, and America's awesome, and I'm just evidence of that.
There's a really interesting, well, it's amusing to me, I'll say, side conversation on Protestantism versus Catholicism.
How so? Which aspect?
Faith alone versus faith and deeds.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, what's interesting is you are professing admiration for one of the most spiritually Catholic Protestants I've ever heard of. And also that this was not an uncommon pattern in, sort of the height of excess Catholic Europe. Like, yeah, it's self-aggrandizing, and they may be a bit of a moral hypocrite, but do they make the world better in a spiritual way? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't think he was a moral hypocrite. I just think he was telling his story, and he thought it was great. He was very.
Sure, I'm reaching there, but I'm talking.
Sure.
Like, sort of the Borgias and stuff.
Right. Well, the point though is that I feel like the American liberalism was one they could actually realize, whereas the English liberalism is one they can never contend with. That's my suspicion. I don't know. I've never been to England. I've only met like a handful of English people, but one thing I do know is that they have a lot of obedience to the order of society, and then to bring in a philosophy where everyone is created equal seems anathema to how they actually think, because it's a difference. It's a difference between what you profess and how you actually live. Like, what is your gut reaction? What's internalized to you? What is your operating system?
So this is something I didn't have time to get to on sort of the notes document, but was very much rattling around in my head all morning as I was prepping this, is sort of class and a recognition of hierarchy and order that is not like logically preordained or preordained by birth or whatever. There is mobility between it, but there is essentially a kind of recognition of rank and conduct that is expected by people of certain levels of achievement or certain levels of inheritance. You're an embarrassment to your father if you don't live up to him, kind of thing. And that's sort of where social rank comes in. You have aristocratic brats, and they are an embarrassment as long as that class has vital energy in them. After a while, their hypocrisy sort of becomes embraced, but it shouldn't be.
Right.
And because it is actually about making the world better in terms of material attainment, again, is a loose proxy for people who talk virtuous and walk virtuous, versus people who talk virtuous and walk vicious, people who talk vicious and walk virtuous. And talking vicious and walking virtuous, by the way, is an indicator of mobility until it becomes an indicate like that you are on your way up in class, until it becomes widely known that you talk vicious in order to gain virtue, and then the social climbers all grab on. Like, we're all playing generation over generation and person over person, both this truth oriented game and this reality based performance oriented game and this social hierarchy oriented game. And in essence, your society has to make like organized civilizational jihad against social climbers.
Well, that's the problem.
Otherwise, your society won't be any good.
And that's why the problem.
And it doesn't matter whether you're liberal or Muslim or whatever. Like, this jihad defines whether you're capable of great things or not. And I think, by and large, the British people have not fully lost their war. But I think we talked about this in DMs, that their system is far more centralized than the US, that the UK has beltway elites on steroids, because everything is in Westminster. Almost nothing matters outside of that. And it's all in one. It's all in one city, and they can be absolutely captured by a social milieu, which is inimical to the people who have to deal with real life and the people who have to deal with this sensibility-based inheritance of right and wrong that we see in like sort of English liberalism. They're a society where the elites are, decapitating their society while they are the head.
Well, and the funny thing is that the English have always had this tendency of feeling that they have a burden to bear, at least the English high society, a burden to bear to help those less fortunate. And the problem is they always seek the most least fortunate people in the world and take up their cause, whether it's like, I don't know, the Gurkhas whenever they're not being paid to be mercenaries, or I always make this joke about different churches in America. It's like
I would almost say the Gurkhas are like, bond of loyalty. Like, hey, bro, you did me a solid. Like, I don't care how different your culture is. As long as you want to come here and participate in this, you did me a solid. I'll put up with a lot.
And that's kind of the Americanism part of like, if you're willing to submit to the way of being a Brit. It's the same way that like academic agent, despite being like half Welsh and half Persian and 0% English, he can become English, in my mind, at least as an American, because he's willing to pretty much submit himself to it and do what an Englishman is supposed to do. And even if he's not ethnically the thing, he is an exemplar of the idea. Like, he tries to become an exemplar of the ideal.
I describe academic agent as 50% Welsh, 50% Persian, 100% English, and 1,000% nutso butso.
Nutso, yeah, he's the. There will be a separate show. Hey, Josh, we got our friends coming in. Josh, I didn't answer your DM. I'm very sorry. I actually haven't had a chance to read your document. Alex, Cosma, I need to be more specific. Cosma has. We'll talk about it. We'll definitely talk about it sometime. We'll definitely talk about it because financialization in America is a hot mess, and we got to stop letting. I'm going to make this is a statement I'm going to make atomically. I'm going to allow you to respond, and then I want us to move on because it's its own thing. We've got to stop letting. I don't even want to call them Ubermenches of capitalism fuck over people who can't handle debt because it's making an underclass, a permanent underclass of people who are very pissed. And that's not good for anybody. And also, it's not Christian, by the way. We're not supposed to engage in usury.
Yeah. The bottom 2/3, like, or 50% of the bell curve, and like saying this without any moral valence whatsoever, simply should not be afforded consumer credit. It should not happen. and it's simply because, like,
it's enough to tempt them.
The ability to grapple with the complexity of the topic is not there.
No, and I've heard someone tell me that student loans are predatory, and
they 100% are.
Well, my hardline part,
it's like bottom half of the bell curve, like that captures almost all 18-year-olds or younger.
Right,
they should not have an option on $200,000 of credit.
The problem is you have to have an IQ of 120 to realize you have an IQ under 100. That's the problem. It's like you have to be pretty smart. That
gets back to the rank concession thing too, and the problem of social climbers, and like one of the ways that you manage some a system like liberalism or something is like I don't want to say you have to, but like an understanding of class hierarchy is almost necessary. And it doesn't need to be rigidly defined like aristocrats or whatever. There does need to be a level of skin in the game and demonstrated history of success with an incredibly strong social attachment that you live up to that success or you are dead to society. You are pathetic if you are a
exactly. There's no option for, and this is where I want to put a button in it. I'm going to probably make one more statement and then we'll just move on back to talking about liberalism. Oh, actually, you know what? I'm going to weave it. I'm like Donald Trump on Joe Rogan. My weave takes like hours. That's the longest weaves. He was trying hard. It's hard. By the way, conversations are hard to have in public. My weave is, does liberalism even hold up when you have such a stratification of ability? So this IQ graph. I hate it when people do this to me. So I sorry to have to do this to you, where I ask a question and then I fucking talk for a minute, and you have to sit there with blue balls wanting to answer my question. I saw this graph earlier that said like physicists and astronomers have like the highest IQ of degree, like in terms of degrees, average. By the way, average.
Sure. Yeah. It's like pure mathematics, physics, certain engineering, philosophy, and then like you go down the rank until you hit like English literature kind of in the middle, and then like the borderline like cognitively deficit are like sociology and stuff. Or no, it's teaching and social work.
The problem with that the graph is that the people who have the really high IQs, especially like engineers and physicists, I will say from culture being in that, like because I am a physicist, is that there is just a tremendous, almost
highly intelligent,
hatred.
Stupid. Highly intelligent.
There's a hatred of the common man in those groups because they just hate it.
For sure.
Which means your entire society could be controlled by people that hate you. Now, I will say that, and don't worry, I'll vamp. I will say this is that thank God for whiskey. Yeah. Oh yeah. All right. What basically
this is a must-read book. It's like 80 pages.
I'll check it out. Oh yeah, I could do that. By the way, for a high IQ, allegedly that I have. By the way, I don't have my IQ tested because to me, having your IQ tested is like a hot girl going onto Tinder just to see how many matches she gets. It's a little trashy. It's a little trashy. What was that? What was the title of that book again?
Basic Laws of Human Stupidity. This is by Carlo Cipolla.
Okay. I'm very not well read, and I actually do that for a reason. There's a design to this because I am deeply afraid that other people's thoughts will become my thoughts and I won't have any originals because there are a lot of very smart people out there. And if I sit and listen to music of other people create, I don't know if I could ever make an original composition. Same reason why a lot of YouTubers don't watch other people's YouTube channels.
I heard somebody say a while back that music is a drug and you need to like really carefully monitor
Oh, it's
your
a drug.
intake or you will become a weird addict. Oh, yeah, it super
I used
is.
to be a
Like
musician.
if you watch
Yeah.
compulsive music listeners, it's like, oh yeah, you are totally just doing this to like maintain an emotional equilibrium and like avoid dealing with either cognitive state or whatever. But
I'm seeing Josh Bibby's like joke here. All right. How do you know when you met an extrovert engineer? He stares at your shoes and not his own when you talk to him. I am the weird exception that I am a proper like 100% extroverted engineer. So me and Elon Musk probably we'd either hate each other or love each other, but I was pretty good at extracting value out of people who are introverted. Don't feel yourself too seen there, Cosmo. I saw your notes. That was a tremendous amount of notes that you made, by the way.
I have to. Nature is calling, so I'll be following along. But please feel free to open up, and I'll catch back up with you.
No worries, no worries. That's how it goes. We find ourselves at a crux. Okay, so here's why I hate. While Alex is gone, I'm going to talk about why I kind of hate Western civilization for one reason, is that it's so self-incoherent. It is, when I read Western philosophy, even that seems so tyrannical. Like if I sit and read Marcus Aurelius, he's like making me feel bad for sleeping in on a Sunday. It's like I gotta sleep in like sometimes I want to sleep in. If I read Plato, Plato or Aristotle, I'm going to feel bad about my morals. However, if I start reading Eastern philosophy, it's a bunch of like fairly nebulous stuff. I feel like Eastern philosophy is trying to make me ask the right questions rather than give me the right answers. And there's less tyranny to it. And I feel like Western civilization creates a lot of tyranny. And I see this with like, I forget which Roman emperor, because everything all roads lead to Rome. I forget which Roman emperor it was. He ran on being very virtuous, but his daughter was a tremendous harlot. It was I feel like I should say that in a more classical way. His daughter was a tremendous harlot. Yes, his daughter was a tremendous harlot. And I have to think that that's just the story of Western civilization, is that as the harder we squeeze, like it's like squeezing sand, is like more grains fall out of your hand when the harder you squeeze. The more we try to make a perfect, that's why I like the founding fathers saying a more perfect union. We're measuring progress rather than an ideal. Like if you try to hold yourself to an ideal, you will always see yourself falling short. If you measure your progress, you will always see yourself going farther and getting better, which why it's like psychologically, you have to measure your progress. You have to measure your progress. And if you start to hold these ideals, especially of history, it's almost better to be ignorant of history and ignorant of what can be achieved. Or you follow Jesus Christ, like I do, and just know that it cannot be achieved, that you are always just a worm. You're always kind of just a different shade of pathetic, but always so. You're always unable to. Caesar Augustus, right, is in prison, but also, yeah, absolutely, yeah. The harder you push, the more perfect. If you make a perfect society or try to make a perfect society, humans will rebel against it. Like the story of Adam and Eve is actually the perfect story that even God could not make a society in which humans can be contained, because we are just that retarded. We absolutely we will make trouble. We're troublemakers. That's all we do. And the thing is, if we see too much trouble, we'll try to make it more orderly, and then we'll overshoot, and then we'll make more, and then someone's going to make more trouble again. And the problem I see with I don't follow any strict I don't follow liberalism. I don't follow any ideology. I've tried to like navel gaze into what I feel politically, and all I really am is a family man. I care about my family, right? Like for my wife, my wife is neurodivergent, right? She's on the autism spectrum. And at some point I realized that the right number of expectations to have on her is 0. She can just do whatever she wants all day. Automatically, because she loves me, she'll try to help me out, do the dishes. She'll go and feed the chickens, that sort of stuff. She'll go and like mow the lawn. Because she likes mowing the lawn. We got one of those ride-on mowers. It's kind of fun. You get to drive a little go-kart all day. And this rigidity of motion, like when I tried to give her jobs and tell her to do stuff, and try to be her leader, commander, whatever you want to call it, it actually led to a less harmonious and less productive house. Same thing as like why people who have unlimited vacation time actually take less vacation, right? This level of societal expectation actually self-defeats and will lead to rebellion. Now, I know like Lib for Life in chat, I will have to catch up. It's hard to have multiple conversations at once, but I detect that you are a little bit unhappy with the state of things and unhappy with the state that things have been in. And I can't help but blame that there is some issue here. I feel like the boomers, like we've had the so-called greatest generation was also an extremely strict generation, which then led to the hippie movement of the 1960s. Like the more we try and grab onto this thing we call civilization, the more strict we try to be, the more noble we're trying to be, the less able we're actually to stay coherent, which is why I'm kind of a Taoist at heart, is that you do have to allow a certain amount of deviation, deviancy, even. What do they call it? What's the buzzword? Alex, oh my gosh, my perspicacity goes way down when I'm on stream. They'll call you a deviant, right? Like you're being I won't remember the exact word, but this I don't consider deviant to be a bad thing necessarily. It's if you start causing others. That's why the proviso in Christian doctrine is like if you cause others to sin, then you should be cut out. It's like don't drag anybody else with you. If you're gonna go do weird stuff, like go do weird stuff. Just don't make it normal and drag others with you. The proper society is not one of a mono ideology, whatever that happens to be. Whether it's wokeism or not. Do I think conservatism is going to overshoot the mark and everyone is going to actually lose their damn minds? Probably. And then they're going to have to like bounce back again. I think we're going to zero in on something that's tolerable. And I think that the American spirit is actually built on conflict, and conflict is how you create identity. As we've said before, like the English had to, was it the English that had to ally against the Danes? I've already forgotten.
Yeah, it was every kingdom except oh god, I don't remember which. Every kingdom except one was defeated, and it was Alfred alone pushing back, and over the course of 3 generations eventually freed all of England from the Danes.
That's the reason why I kind of like I have certain like socialism coded things in my personal behavior. Like for me, like when I was a landlord, we talk about this on Twitter. I just charged whatever I charged at first, and I never changed my rate because it never my expenses never increased. Do I want to create a commune? Well, by the way, a commune is the most American thing to ever do, which is the weirdest. Before communism existed, we had communes. If you ever like silverware, Oneida. You ever heard about the history of Oneida? So
Oneida? No.
Oneida, yeah. Oneida. It was a commune. However, the commune had a silversmith join, and he was like the absolute man's man. He was a great trapper, hunter, but he was a great silversmith. And that's how they got into the silverware industry. So if you go to any Walmart or any like place, you'll see a set of Oneida on the shelf. They were a free love commune. It wasn't even Christian, really. I mean, if it was Christian, it was in name only. But Americans did that stuff all the time, and most of them failed. But like, there's a place for that here, and then I think some people should be pulled from the bonds of financialism, which is what I would cause like unless it's like give me $1 and I'll give you an apple. If it becomes like more complicated than that, it becomes financialism, and I think like the bottom 50% of the bell curve starts to lose out on that.
Yeah, Taleb has a line on this, something to the effect of, on the level of the world politically, I'm a libertarian.
Yes,
On the level of country, I'm a Republican. On the level of my social circle, I'm a socialist, and on the level of my family, I'm a communist.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just like the definition of what is a family.
It's scale variant behavior, and we've talked about this in the past. Family is the basic unit of fellow feeling.
And boomers charging their children rent is, to me, the most weird shit. I understand charging like a token rent. Like if I were to stay past 21, my dad would charge me like $400 a month, which is pretty easy to come up with. But like,
or like I lived in a family home for ages, and I paid like a real rent on the family home, but that's because we were all in this together, and I volunteered to raise it. Because my parents were going through hard times.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, exactly. That's like voluntarism, right? I kind of want to attack, and I do mean attack. I love using language purposefully. I have to find what are Carl Benjamin's points. Yeah, let's pull.
I have them outlined at the top. If you're talking about the false assumptions,
yeah, let's jump into that. Let's just jump into that.
All right. Yeah, so I'll just run through these.
If you could share them up.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
I can open up the articles, or I can open up my outline.
If you can remember the articles well enough, then we could do the outline. But if you want to go point by point, then
I'll just go. I'll share up the article and then read from the points. Let's see.
I will also mention that the sort of Taoist sort of way is kind of the marries well with the Christian "we are fallen, but we are also divine" sort of way. So I think it's kind of funny that those two philosophies actually converged towards a similar path. All right, there we go. Got it.
Yeah, so I just got a big stonking image on here, but the first false assumption of liberalism is...
can you scroll down to it? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Or highlight it, yeah.
Yeah, it's pre-social man and the state of nature. So this is, particularly when anthropology was in its infancy, the sort of conjecture that there was a man prior to organized society, pre-evolution and all that, all of human beings, non-human ancestors were hierarchically organized social creatures.
Yes.
Human civilization
I believe that because almost every social animal is. There's not a single flat structure to any socialized animal.
Yeah, socialization and society is older than human beings, and this is the Jordan Peterson lobster point.
Which I wish you had picked something that was like a little more.
Hierarchy, social hierarchy is older than life on land.
By the way, I'm going to point out that when you're an intellectual speaking with intellectuals, using the most extreme point is actually very helpful. When you're trying to convince people, using the most extreme point is extremely unhelpful because it requires the maximum abstraction. Whereas if you say even other humans, just like every human civilization has been hierarchical. Any civilization
for life that doesn't make it right. It's like you can't derive, there's the old philosophical saying you can't derive an ought from an is. The opposite is also true. You cannot derive an is from an ought.
It's going to be that way. Like the biggest failure
it's
of
inevitable. It's baked into the material nature of reality. You have to accept it and move on, or sit there and shit yourself. Like one of the points I have in the outline is that of all the natural rights outlined by classic English liberals, one of the ones they put in there is private property. And it turns out actually private property is not a right. It's all resources can only be used exclusively. Private property is not a right or a philosophical concept. It is an inescapable fact of material existence.
It is. So it is ordained. So right now I have 22 acres of forest I don't use, right? Like if I try to use it as well as someone else and we don't have a hierarchy, well, then we're just going to have conflict. right? He's going to want to log and I'm going to want to hunt, and that's just going to be the way it goes. Let's say that I have just a patch of grass, right? Like maybe I just want to keep it grass, but my neighbor wants to make it into he wants to farm beans or something like that, right? Like we can't both act. In other words, you can't have your cake and then you can't have one cake and then both people eat a full cake. I guess what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah. And it goes even further. Like, say you realize an idealized communist dream and somehow all material things become usable by all agents in the world. You know, the perfect communal ownership of property. Well, you still have a form of property which is fundamentally private, which is the person. You know, that if you accept that people are going to be different at all, which like we have to get into the whole like Neon Genesis Evangelion thesis here at some point, because
I will not be forced to watch anime. I will watch it in secret. It's a moral imperative. This is the super ego. The super ego is like.
So I'm not saying you have to watch anime as like I am saying it is a clean, concise.
I'm gonna have ChatGPT turn it into a Western cartoon.
Is the nature of reality, like you know, because some people do want honest to God end of Evangelion as their metaphysics.
Right,
the dissolution of all beings into one. If you accept that you can somehow create perfect communal ownership of all things, you still have, but individuals are different. You still have private property. Because, you know, the use of your time, your attention, you know, your interest, your use sexually, etc. All these things are still going to be limited. And therefore, you know, the limitation of these things is oppressing someone who wants to fuck you but can't.
Well, and I also have to say, like, what are the false assumptions of the false assumptions here? Because I'm seeing like Grotius, Hobbes, Locke, that was considered a state of nature to be possible theoretical. It's a possible theory. It's not a wrong thing to say something's a possible theoretical state. But I wonder, by the way, this is why I think, should American liberalism be completely separate from the rest of liberalism? Because I don't want to absorb all of the weird proto-commie stuff of the European liberals. I don't even know when was Rousseau even active. Like that was while we were a union.
Rousseau. I had this thought earlier today to look this up, sort of what his active period was, 1712 to 1788.
Yeah, okay.
So I know he was an influence on Paine.
Well, that's the thing is like all of our founding fathers grabbed these influences of varying liberal influences and then had to go into conflict in order to make something that was cohesive for all of it, which I think actually de-radicalized a lot of.
Talked about this in Conceived in Liberty, which is actually a volume series you might enjoy. Like it's 4 volumes. He died before he could finish the 5th, about the colonization and settlement of the Americas, and the goal was to go all the way through the constitutional period, and he only roughly made it through the revolutionary period. One of the things he talks about in there is the ideological force of revolutionary movements. And that if you are, you know, innovating in a sense, you have to kind of do what the founding fathers did in the Declaration of Independence, which is invent your predecessors. You have to take this and make it look as though it was inevitable. And there's a lot of this going on where people were glomming onto all kinds of other sources as ex post facto rationalizations for what they felt they needed to do. Well, and you have people like, you know, in a minor land dispute going on to, you know, over time, asserting the necessary political sovereignty of a people. I forget which uprising this was, but like, it's no accident Count Dankula is a hardcore libertarian, because when he got into the public eye, there was a need to intellectually justify his position. And he may have fully done it himself to his satisfaction, but in order to convince others, you need to lean on, some level of prestige or precedent.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Like, are people actually based on historically founded ideologies? By the way, I consider an ideology anything that you're willing to, die for is a pretty steep price, but like, is it a set of things you're willing to set your life to? Right.
Yeah.
Which is why I think there's also faux ideologies of the people who we were talking about before that claim to have it, but don't actually hold to those principles.
Yeah. And I have a more different technical definition, but like,
sure. Yeah, what is
definition of what I think I've done it in the past, but the loosest definition of ideology, which you are absolutely hitting here, is a set of principles and beliefs around which people organize their lives. And if you're talking in like a social political sense, it's not usually what people mean when they say ideology or describe someone as an ideologue, but it's a rough sense of people have a map of reality in their mind and behave according to it.
And I would go a little bit further and say this is a thing that they submit themselves to. This is why I'm saying that like submission to something is actually key to having an identity, rather than being the only people that don't submit to something are psychopaths, I think. Right? Like, you submit yourself to something is more important than you, which is a key of almost every moral system when it comes, whether it's the Freemasons or AA meetings or being an Englishman, being an American, following the Ummah. All this stuff is that you are less important than something else. Only psychopaths consider themselves more important than something else.
Yeah.
And what system they make. By the way, I don't know if liberalism is liberalism even cohesive? Because if you have this many authors to something, I feel like it can't be cohesive unless they had some sort of convention where they decided upon things, or at least debates, right? Were these people contemporaries, or were they just corpses throwing ideas past each other, right? Dead words of dead men.
So this is, where did I put it in the document? Sorry, I'm scanning for something.
No, by all means. Don't ever apologize for taking time to think. Any moment spent thinking is not a moment wasted. If you would like, I can vamp while you do that.
Yeah.
Yes. Whenever you get too, I think there's a saying, I think it's a Swedish saying, that a man with one clock always knows what time it is. A man with two clocks is never sure. I would say a man who has one philosopher always knows what is right. A man with two philosophers will never be sure. They will, even among the ancient Greeks, like the very first, there was disagreement, tremendous disagreement. Me and Alex Cosma here have disagreements, and we're going to continue to have disagreements. Sometimes we come in with an agenda, like one of us will. You may or may not know during the conversation. I suspect both of us do sometimes. My agenda is essentially that America has to be free to make its own mistakes and decisions, and we must see it in its purity play out, because this is a once in a planet opportunity to see ideas actually compete with each other and fight each other, whereas everything else has established Pareto distributions, right? Where it's like, okay, you're in India, it's going to be Hindu. You're in Afghanistan, it's going to be Muslim. And like any incursion has to be imperial in its sense, whereas America becomes much more of an open conversation where the merits can actually be discussed versus might becomes right.
So that jogged my memory exactly. One of the things about liberalism as it exists now is, if you go through the process of ideologizing it, and I have in the notes here that there's there's a tendency toward reification in all ideology, which is turning a network of relationships between ideas, facts about material reality, the way people interact sociologically into a concrete thing. Like when liberalism stops being a network and starts being a thing. And like, this is one of the, I think, big problems with James Lindsay is he's reified liberalism into, kind of an idol.
I would love to spend the last 20 minutes almost talking about the sort of modern James Lindsay conception of what liberalism is, because it is trying so hard to be cohesive. But
I've been trying so hard to discover what is actually meant by that.
I think he's using it. I think it's a full subversion. I feel like he's fallen in love with the left's like word game tools.
Yeah.
And he's trying, but it's in the age of authenticity. It is not doing great.
Yeah. That's the thing is, I spent a lot of today scrolling through his long post trying to figure out like, okay, what do you actually mean by liberalism and classical liberalism? And, the best I can get just taking him at his word is it's a not well understood pastiche at all. And it's sort of a mess of vibes and feelings, if I suppose that this is what he's interested in. In fact, what it's come off to me much more is exactly what you said, is like, okay, if I take you at your word, I don't understand what you mean by liberalism, but the way you have been deploying it over the last 6 months, this actually looks far more like an orchestrated, cynical, subversive attack.
Yeah, which is, by the way, people have become very immune to. So the
super duper. No, yeah. Wait, it's also like he's doing the, the full woke thing. I think particularly, we can have disagreements with somebody like Carl Benjamin, but James Lindsay screaming, he's crying out as he strikes him. Like, bro, you are picking the worst target for these accusations. Like, okay, maybe you can get into what he says, but you're not really going into the substance. You're going into this stupid guilt by association game, attempting to smear somebody who's clearly an honest actor.
I would absolutely,
I would defend everything he says, but like, Carl is obviously acting in good faith, and you're crying out while striking someone. This is nuts.
Hopefully we have Carl on for another live thing. Like we've been getting we've been getting Dan, which is good. Dan is like a proxy for Carl, but it's like he's not Carl. My contention, by the way, is that the old world of Europe cannot withstand liberalism, but I don't even know if liberalism is cohesive enough to say is anything in particular, because unfortunately,
I mean, to the Germans, to the French, no, absolutely not.
That's fine. It's the thing is, it's so easy to, if a system is easy to subvert, it's not a system. Right.
This is why I say liberalism is cancer prone.
It doesn't have the cohesive DNA.
And works as long as you don't have cancer. But guess what? You have extra long telomeres.
Well, and this is why I want
sun exposure problem. You are just going to get cancer.
And this is why I want to sever American liberalism from European liberalism. Because first off,
that's why I bring up the 5 false assumptions, because they exist almost completely within the English and French paradigms.
Yeah, they're arguing against
in order to harvest the fruit, you need to get rid of these. Because here's the other thing about liberalism: you don't need to agree with its ideological pre-commitments or its rationalistic pre-commitments to recognize that the in order to of what it's achieving to be valuable and worthwhile. And in fact, you can reinvent those from new premises. For instance, private property, the ability to have property and to engage in the natural human activity of accumulation and enriching the earth over the course of one's lifetime, the ability to be free from unwarranted political interference, to be free to self-determine one's ends among those that are morally acceptable within one's society, etc., etc. You go down these things like these are desirable ends where you don't have to accept these premises, and these are not the only premises that can bring these about.
The thing about capital,
the false assumptions are so important. You know, we're probably not going to cover them here all, but like that's why they're important to go through to realize. If you want a system that works, it has to not have the vectors that give it cancer.
Right. And by the way, one thing I like to tell about tell leftists when they hate capitalism, as I do say at the very core, capitalism is just the system where you get to own things and decide what to do with them.
Yep.
Which is distinct from fascism, where fascism is where you own things, but you don't get to decide what to do with them.
Yep. The responsibility it's essentially you're responsible for losses and bad things happening to your capital, but somebody else is responsible for the good things. I mean, capitalism also has its own reification phase, and this is one of the areas where libertarians
it's the Pareto distribution run amok, is that you can have people who are, and by the way, you'll see
what you're interested in is preserving not like some idealized free market, like idolized golden calf god. What you're interested in preserving is people's ability to interact with the inalienable fact that material things command exclusive use, and that living human beings have the ability to have control of, exclusive control of the things they need to live.
Yeah. And there's you have to put limiter. That's why I feel like a world that's built on embracing the paradoxes rather than ignoring them is so much better. Because yes, if you allow full unabridged private property, you will have a few people own everything, and you'll see like white supremacists in America glom on to rightist property.
White supremacists
rights.
Are disproportionately socialist economically.
That's the funny thing is because they'll see that like Jews and Asians are taking everything over. It's like, yeah, like, well, that's the Pareto distribution. Do you want to make it not happen? Maybe you should like. It would be interesting if there were, and ironically, that runs counter to the sort of liberalist value of being against redlining. Like, to me, in my mind, like the English would want to have redlining. It's like you have to be able to trace 500 years of English heritage if you want to own a home in this village. Like, this village is for Englanders. Like, and funny thing enough is like it would be kind of nice if like for some of these identitarians, it's like, okay, you have to draw your lineage from Africa. You have to be able to like trace it from Africa, or you have to be a proper slave. Not because they'll start eventually. Like you say like, oh, you're a Black American. What kind of Black American? It's like, are you one of the slavers who came from Africa, or are you one of the slaves that got shipped from Africa to America? By the way, one of the ways that I use to destroy these groups or just like cause mayhem because I'm an absolute troll is just ask them these questions. It's like, which kind of African are you? And I'll usually like lionize the victim, because that's what makes them go crazy. Is I'll say like, I'll lionize the victim and say like, okay, are you one of the I would say betrayed people? Are you one of the betrayed children of Africa? The cast off son of Africa, the cast off daughter of Africa, or are you one of the gold mongers, the Mansa Musas, right? And it's like, they start fighting. It's like, it is what it is. It's like, no,
that's your own private version of will you curse Shiva?
Yeah, exactly. And I do that. I do that pretty often. Will you curse slavery in its entirety? Well, then will you curse the ones who sold you? Because you weren't stolen from Africa. You were sold for like molasses and whatever else. I forget what Africans were buying at the time. It's all market forces. The barter days were like, there's no global. America is like one of the first global currencies in my mind. Maybe the British sterling. I don't know. Maybe just gold. But even gold is stamped by houses of repute, which verify
gold is the only international, because gold is gold, and the stamps and the discounting for gold coins or bullion or whatever is just how trustworthy is the source, that like the modern equivalent is, I'm not just getting a veneer with a tungsten core.
Right. And that's why the high trust societies always win when it comes to currency. Like any financial system, high trust societies will destroy a low trust society. And there's no competition. They'll basically be enslaved. If you're not
because like internally and just on a strictly economic standpoint, their transaction costs are minimal versus your transaction costs in somewhere like India are preposterous.
Bribes,
you have to move through so many levels of taking advantage of bribes,
having your contract sold out after you've already signed it is actually a big one that people don't think of, because in the West they conceive that, a contract is a contract. Nope. If someone comes in the day after you've signed off to do the highway, someone else might get signed off to do the highway. There's your actual labor. There's your resources. Like, are they going to charge you more? I forget which famous example there was where someone would just say like, okay, we've got your goods here, but we're not going to give them to you unless you pay us 20% over, or some ridiculous bribe amount. Anyways.
Yeah, that's a common thing in China too, is that, in Western cultures, the deal is the deal. And even if the market turns, you have to honor the obligation.
Yep.
In China, it's standard practice. Like, nah, dog, the market turned, like, we're renegotiating right the F now.
Right.
And this is just an implicit part of every contract. What was it you were saying about, if you're going to sin alone, don't drag anyone else down with you?
Yeah, correct. That's the Christian doctrine of whether or not you should be purged from the church.
Sometimes like attracts like, and I tend to know a decent number of people like me. As a highly nomadic atheist, I wish there were less people like me in the world. Like, a society of people who are like me, like in the main, cannot work.
Well, for me, I mean, our faith aligns us, but we also have a temperament. I feel like temperament actually plays a large part.
Yes, temperament, disposition.
Yeah, the genetic temperament of my people is like, I think I said, like I said on my Twitter, is like, I don't need to read a philosophy book to know that I need to beat a thief with a stick. It's like, if I found like someone was a pedophile or something like that, like even if they were my own family, I'd be like, well, you got to hang, and I'm going to put a sign on you to let everybody else know what happens if you're one of those things. Like, I don't need to read a book. I don't need to have a doctrine. I don't even need to have a culture. It just feels like the right thing to do. When I was a kid, it was funny being in American schools, is that someone would disrespect me or speak lies, like speak in bad faith. And I'd just lunge across the table to attack them. And they were like surprised. It was like, no, you don't get to lie to me, you son of a gun. We were having an argument, and you held up one principle for your advantage. And then as soon as it wasn't to your advantage, you rescinded that principle. We're going to go to blows, which I feel like is speaks to my lineage's lack of structure in our societies. We had a very unstructured society, which America used to have. I think Americans would have done it like 100 years ago. Them's fighting words, and then someone just lunges across the table at a poker game and fights them. The American way, I don't want it to be lost, and I feel like the English are already sort of what do you call it? They are so deep in their own need for cohesiveness that they become incohesive, right? Like these liberalist values that they've grabbed onto that are just incohesive is crazy. Like I said on my Twitter before, is like, all of your problems could be solved if, one, you actually prosecuted crimes, and two, stopped giving money to people who don't earn it. Like, and all of you, like you guys keep dragging liberalism into this. They grab onto genetics, they grab onto liberalism, they grab onto all this stuff, and it's like, no, you just betrayed the two concepts of what runs a civilization in basic. Don't give money to random people that didn't earn it, and you should punish crimes if they did that. By the way, one of the things I say against all these genetic type people is that, like, in terms of the trajectory of the race of Black Americans, they were doing really well after slavery.
Better than whites generation over generation. The trajectory was better.
Suck it, Scotch Irish. Eat my They were actually doing well.
I mean, part of it is like the carpetbaggers came down and imparted New England like ethics and
Anglo, English.
Yeah. What Anglo New English like values. And it turns out those are massively successful for the accumulation of capital intergenerationally and forming stable communities. And like, the American blacks who were raised primarily on like that Scotch-Irish backwoods culture, as the second citizens to, Southern aristocracy, they started rocketing past them because they had the better cultural technology that got given to them by the carpetbaggers.
Well, yeah. And the thing is the blacks also, I think, had the benefit of, we don't talk about the benefits of racism, but they are there. Is like, for me, at least with my I don't want to say people, because we're not homogeneous at all. But a lot of Asians were whipped into shape because our accents would get made fun of, or we'd be stereotyped in some other way. And what happens is, if you live in a generation of shame for having an other culture, like not submitting to the predominant culture, you actually like embrace the current culture, right? Like if the racial stereotype is that you're a single mother and everyone mocks you for it, you will be less predisposed to having being a single mother. It is a racialized way of having cultural reinforcement of good behaviors.
Yeah, it's bullying, normalizing social behavior and acclamation.
And the racism part is actually just an extra sting to like really make it hurt. Because if I start saying that you're a disgrace to your race, which by the way was a phrase that blacks would use on other blacks, it's like you are being a disgrace to your race right now. Like you going out here getting drunk and fighting people in public. Like everyone is looking at you. All these white people in this town, this predominantly white town, are looking at you and saying this is what a black guy does. Which, by the way, is what's happening on social media. Now, you can deny it. People can deny it if they want. That is exactly what's happening, because congratulations, liberals, you've made the N-word become extremely popular again, and it's going to be used at full force. Like you've coddled Black America back into being something that can be absolutely ridiculed in public again, and you've put them back into Jim Crow era. Like you don't,
because what you're seeing is what you're seeing is the civil rights movement, and particularly the cashing out of social capital of past grievances, moving through an adjusting and attenuation period, actually give cover to bad actors, because they can they can fall back on this this cover that's provided by this expended social capital, and they not like essentially you have this progressive defense of bad behavior, and now you're having people catching up to like, I see you defending bad behavior over there at this point systematically. Well, and I no longer care about your grievances.
The Biden, by the way, and it's like the same way that the Biden administration made Trump's second term happen.
Right, exactly. Trump 2.0, if he had come out on top in 2020, would not have been anything like this.
No, dude. If America canceled all welfare for single mothers, you know who it would hurt most. And America would cheer for it and be super glad that it's hurting those people the most. I have never seen so much anger in my life. And I'm more or less just trying to stay out of it. But also, like, you have to allow a pressure valve. You have to allow a pressure valve for it.
Yeah.
Like,
you do. And the fact is that like we've had our pressure valve bypassed for years, and you don't have that natural social attenuation. And one of the other things, like, just personal anecdote, I think I was in third grade. This was like first year when I moved to Virginia. I was a weird kid, and I had a lot of behaviors that were not like normal and like, chill for a third grader.
Nobody who's exceptional is ever normal, by the way.
But I had a bully named Stephanie in my class.
You got bullied by a girl. I'm going to make fun of you. I'm just kidding.
Wait, it was fairly female pattern bullying.
Oh, yeah.
And like it's not exactly like a violent time to be a kid in terms of
Oh, I see what you're
physical
saying.
bullying and stuff like that. So it was kind of the most effective bullying. But she was focused on essentially like beating me into acceptable behavior. And I learned from some of my shit, but I also and this also stems back to something you talk about fairly often in some of your solo videos, is the moment of moral awakening. For me, it was both like, oh, okay, I am doing something that is getting me negative attention. And then, okay, I'm going to adjust my behavior, but Stephanie continues bullying, partially because now it's a reputation.
Well, you're just a target now.
It's this thing. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, I'm sitting there at 10 years old, wargaming this forward in my head. And it's like, well, do I retaliate, etc.? And like for me, it was a moment of like serious moral awakening. And one day I just go up to her and say, like, hey, Stephanie, this is the way things have been going between us. I can begin retaliating in this way and we can keep doing this forever because we're here through 6th grade. But I don't think either of us wants to do that. So can we just drop it? And this is like in line to go to recess. And she's like, oh, yeah, I see the trajectory this is on.
Yeah, like I see what's going on. Yeah, exactly.
Like there is and James Lindsay will get on your ass for saying anything is thesis, antithesis.
I do want to have a shit on James Lindsay stream at some point. Yeah, I do. I think it'd be funny because I think
I agree.
He's essentially he's a liberalism race trader as far as I'm concerned. He's like been the worst representative of like he's just dragged it through the mud. Like we're trying to keep a reputation here. Yeah. Like I am the black guy who's telling the one guy to stop acting like an N-word all the time. It's like, you need to stop acting like an N-word because you're being
right.
one.
Exactly.
James Lindsay, stop. I'm going to strangle you.
Yeah.
You make us all look bad.
Yeah, he developed so much social capital, and it's amazing how fast he burned it on really stupid.
He just stops. It was years ago. It was like 3 years ago. He just like would shoot off on Twitter. It's like, you need to get away from this app. Okay, like if you're responding to nobodies. Okay, if the nobody has a good point, that's fine. Like if he's like the nobody's wrote in a little mini essay and is like he's got some good points, that's fine. But if the nobody's just like
if you can really hilariously roast them.
Oh, that's true. That's true. Yeah, absolutely. Use those like Yoshi jumps, like ditch the Yoshi and make a higher jump. Absolutely ditch the Yoshi. We're over time. I'm willing to go over as long as you want. It's a Sunday. I'm chilling. But like what I'm saying here is that the American way of having liberalism, right, needs to be defended and obviously defined. And I think the founding fathers are a good start. But I've also seen someone say like, "Oh, here's a founding fathers writings," and it's like saying like white America, like white man. I was like, and I asked the person who said that, I was like, "How many slaves do you own?" Well, obviously the founding fathers weren't 100% right about everything because we don't own any slaves. If I could own slaves, I would absolutely. By the way, it'd be so fun. The monkey's. I love the monkey's paw. The monkey's paw is a great concept to me of anyone who's ideological, because like you'll see these like white nationalists like, we need to bring back slavery, and it was like monkey's paw. Brrr. It's like some Indian guys own like 100 American like white slaves, some shit.
Well, we're also in the process of so here's the wild thing. It's like, oh, we are constantly trying to reinvent slavery. It's not even funny how often we try and do it.
It's like, kind of inevitable. I mean, you have inevitable in a bad way.
H-1B visa scheme consciously,
yeah,
as a means to undercut the working wages, particularly in corporate R&D, of graduate and postgraduate workers in mathematics and physics, and to bring in a client class who will work for half the wages and is significantly more compliant because you essentially have power over their ability to earn what they earn. You have illegal immigration and their inability to enforce workers' rights. Like, it's crazy to me that leftists are both all about unions and all about, like refugees, asylum seekers, like let them in. They're just coming for a better life. And it's like, yeah, they're coming because they can make more than they did before, but they will never once talk to any labor relations board because they
No.
legally can't without getting fucked. Like, the reason this happens is to essentially reinstitute slavery. And then you have
Yes.
literal
Yeah.
slavery. Like, we're constantly trying to reinvent it. And like, you know, intensive machines like, you know, ATMs or, you know, a KitchenAid or something that do something very specific preposterously well do not romance the popular imagination, at least not since the 60s, the way that extensive machines like human-shaped robots, like,
Right.
oh, we're reinventing slavery without the labor issues or the guilt. Like, nobody romanticizes the KitchenAid or the ATM. They're far more productive than a human-shaped robot is going to be. But my God, slaves.
The human-shaped robot is entirely to capture the imagination of the stockholder and then the stock buyer, the potential stock buyer. Any machine that's worth a damn is specialized, just like any person is, right? Like that's the whole reason why human beings are actually less productive than machines, is because we're not built for the task. So you build this humanoid robot, it's not built for any particular task, and it's just all faff. Like the argument is completely incohesive as to what is the value of human labor. It doesn't hold. It just doesn't hold.
Yeah. There's a really interesting intersection point between Taleb, who is obliquely sort of anti-large corporate capitalism, particularly in like Black Swan and Anti-Fragile, partially because size fragilizes, and the size we have on, you know, corporations and, you know, corporate capitalism in the United States is unnatural. We prop it up. And Vivek Ramaswamy, in his first book, Woke Inc., where he spends a great deal of time talking about fiduciary responsibility, and how it creates sort of a legal superpower, where liability is limited rather than unlimited, as is conventionally the case, and how this comes with very tight restraints. It's like, you know, it's like the genie in Aladdin. Like, you have, you know, godlike power, itty bitty living space, and, you know, when Jafar wishes to become a genie, he gets the things clasped on his wrists, and it binds him. Fiduciary responsibility is sort of the genie clasps. It's interesting to see how we've overstepped, and how humanoid robots represent a similar kind of overstep.
And overstep by like how? Like in terms of cost, capabilities, dehumanization? Like, what do you mean?
I mean more in not the literal sense. Like, you know, you have labor saving devices. This means labor gets reallocated.
Sure,
right?
Yeah.
More an overstep in what you were saying about how, you know, it doesn't really necessarily appeal to anyone other than you know, kind of stockholders. In that there's a I'm going to sound all socialist now, but like,
go for it.
There's a kind of dollar signs in the eyes sort of thing of like,
I see.
Let's bypass the necessity of living together and getting along with our fellow human being kind of thing.
Well, it's there's a dehumanization when you start to imitate the human form. There's a dehumanization to it. Like, there's one thing of like a printer printing out a painting versus a humanoid robot with a paintbrush painting that painting. There's something there that's like becomes the same thing with AI, right? Like, how are we going to contend with this?
AI I no longer marvel at. I'm like, I don't give a shit.
Well,
it's a reverse Turing test too, because if an artist makes something that's like AI imitable,
exactly.
About you, like,
it's actually done a
Turing test.
It's done a lot to delegitimize a lot of people's legitimate art, like formerly legitimate art. Is like, oh yeah, the AI could spit because it's derivative. Like, the art is derivative. I was at a Renaissance festival near Nashville a little while ago, and I got to like look at the art of an original Magic the Gathering's artist, and I was like, nothing is like this.
Yeah,
nothing is like this.
Oh, they're fucking wild. Like
They're
they're
rad.
serious
Super
ass
rad.
compositions.
Yeah. I actually wanted to buy a bunch of prints. I got to look up. I have his Patreon up. Like I'll have to like give. Anyways, we talked a little bit about liberalism. I think it would actually be kind of interesting to go through Carl's critique of it. Like we talked about liberalism as is in a somewhat disorganized manner, in a conversational manner, as well as I'll say generously. But it'd be kind of interesting to go through Carl's critiques because, on the whole, just in a couple of minutes, like, do you think he was critiquing American liberalism or is he critiquing some sort of European liberalism on the whole? What percentage pertains to us?
So I would say, so I'll just run through the points without article sharing. So pre-social man in the state of nature, we put some time into that. Everyone is equal. Get out of here. Like,
we Americans do not believe in that shit at all.
Yeah. No one's conduct is exactly equal. QED.
God made the Irishman to let us know that was not true.
The universal man. There are some inalienable and basic, like, least common denominator aspects of human beings, but like the way human beings actually behave and manifest in the world is not universal.
Here's the funny thing,
a lot of weird natural rights people will try and be like, oh, all these, live for life, equal in dignity. Like, welcome, sir. You are metaphysically a Christian, hardcore AF. Oh, this is also
it's funny. A lot of these people who rebel against Christianity actually have a lot of Christian in them, which is pretty funny. It's like
this is like the most important thing about liberalism. Liberalism technologically is an API for Christianity. It is an application program interface layer that sits on top of Christianity and allows it to interface with non-Christian systems without it affecting the source code. It can make calls on Christianity, and Christianity can use it to make calls on other cultures. If you remove the base program of Christianity, liberalism does not function. If you secularize liberalism enough, liberalism stops making API calls correctly and starts going nuts because you're inserting spaghetti code in there just to make it return anything. I think that's where we are now, honestly.
Right.
So universal man, by the way, is essentially a product of that API being capable of interfacing with other cultures. The blank slate, we're not blank slates, obviously. If nothing else, if you're a strict Kantian epistemologist, you have to admit that the biological reality of being born into a body provides your consciousness information just on the level of its physicality.
What I like
That's
to
the extreme example.
By the way, what I like to have about Live for Life, I want to let you know that unknowingly to yourself that you are actually creating the most worst Christians ever, because you're asking questions that begin to dissolve the current state of what is decent. So rather than actually weaken Christianity, like, so for me, I'll give you some my background. I am descended from the Capitan, like, governor. It was called Capitan Major, right? He has a rank in the Navy as well as a basically a position of governor of the Dutch East Indies. The Manasseh family represents the Christian converts from that lineage. We absolutely engage in slavery. We do not believe in the universal man. We believe that slavery is actually an inherent and necessary part of what makes someone human, because you must learn first to serve a master before you can serve yourself. This is a part of. So if you want to attack like classical liberalism, just know that there are other forces that will take its place, and you will not like it. You will suffer me. You will suffer those who will take your communistic utopia and subvert it to their own will. Those who have the charisma, the physicality, the mental acuity, and frankly, the ability to understand other ways of life and then weave them into something cohesive, which right now you have an incohesive society. if you continue this revolutionary mindset where you make things incohesive, you only open the gates for those who will make it cohesive, and you will not like it. You are already seeing it. Trump was elected by not a majority, but by the popular vote, and it's going to continue going that way if it doesn't stop. You can deny it if you like, but if you continue to erode the very pillar upon which your life was built upon, the inherent God-given right of property, of the pursuit of happiness, to speech, you will end up with something extremely bad, which, by the way, is also my same warning to the rightists, to those who are like Christian nationalists or genetic nationalists who say like America is a genealogy.
It's a childhood temper tantrum of, I look at the world isn't the way I want. I am going to stamp my feet and say, I want to make everybody do what I want. It's like, okay, but you have no consideration for how this operates sociologically between generations of people, how it, the incentives it creates, especially the incentives it creates for social climbers and sociopaths. Correct. And if you don't sociopath proof your society and legal system, you're fucked.
Yeah. If you don't have the ability to understand everyone's point of view, you will end up in a land of usury where we make slaves that way. You'll have
we landed back at that. I didn't even put it in the notes document. I just like messaged you as soon as I thought it, like random thought. Liberalism is one of the most dangerous ideologies a person can have if they have no theory of mind.
Correct. It is the ideology of the top 20%. So what I'm saying to you right now is that this.
If you give it to the bottom quintile.
What I'm saying to you right now is that the enjoyment you have of your life is granted to you by that top quintile, right? And because they see you as equals. As soon as you either start trying to take all their property in some communistic queue, or you start trying to say like, well, this is a certain race's nation in some idiotic queue, in some sort of Ku Klux Klan sort of manner, the top 20%, which is not homogeneous, by the way, guys like Elon Musk interact on a daily basis with people of different cultures, which is why like the tech bros all believe in a multicultural society, because they're all being fed like the top 2% of every population on the planet. So
exactly. They'll meet it's such an exposure bias thing.
Yeah.
And this is also partially why like racism is low class just on a sociological level.
You get the worst
like
of it.
The people who are exposed to like the very worst of stereotypical group behaviors tend to be the people on the bottom getting exposed to it by other people on the bottom.
Right.
And they develop bad ideas about the only people of that group that they meet, which are the people on the bottom. Yeah. And vice versa.
So you just much like my renters back when I was in Maryland as a landlord, they enjoyed a very low rent. Not very low, but it was like reasonable. It's like $400 for a side bedroom plus the hallway bathroom, and then $600 if you wanted a master bedroom, which was like pretty huge. It was like half the top floor and their own private bathroom. Back in 2014, and their rates never went up. If they ever complained about their rates, I would jack that up really. Like, you live on the mercy of the bed. Also, to make my little closing argument, liberalism is a pretty damn good compromise for the rest of the 80% and for the top 20%, because we can't have the bottom 80% furious at the top 20% at all times. So this unsteady truce of somewhat charity of those who can climb the social ladder and the economic ladder and the IQ ladder and every ladder, right? Like even the predisposition between being trade openness, that's just a personality thing. And that's massive towards success. These very small populations that gather all of the success have always, I'm not even saying under capitalism, just every system of government, communism, monarchism, feudalism, whatever you want to have, that mercy of the top percent has always been what's kept the bottom in sort of a tolerable condition. As soon as there was some sort of break between the two, the ones at the top would either lash out and attack, or they would just abandon the bottom And if you want to see what happens when people abandon the bottom, you can actually just look at most of modern Europe right now. Because in my theory, is that they've been sort of left to the dogs.
You can read the Bible and look at the case basically every time the Israelites decide they want a king. It turns into a mess for a variety of reasons. The same pattern is echoed in Persia. The same pattern is echoed in Greece. Essentially, the sexual disenfranchisement of basically the bottom quintile of men. Although often in the case of Israel or Persia, it was the sexual disenfranchisement of everybody but the top quintile of men.
Yeah.
You create a massive amount of social instability. And in a past stream, I talked about like, oh my God, like, there's the old saying, war is the health of the state. And there's kind of a graduate level reason why this is true, which is that all past societies that were widely successful over broad periods of time, including liberal social arrangements, rigorously and viciously controlled its bottom quintile to the point where its social impact on society was almost non-existent.
Well, it's the thing is that the majority lives at the mercy of the minority, but the minority also lives at the mercy of the majority in different ways, right? Like having this truce. And that's why America is like a weird thing to me, is like the founding fathers thought they might have 50 years in this union. And we've exceeded their expectations by 5
coming up.
Yeah, we've got 250 coming up. And the thing is, all right, so I'm going to close by this. I was like, I made this little tweet, this big like mini essay of like the robustness of a system is based on what has been thrown at it and what it's endured. And so far, America has actually fairly well endured what's been thrown at it. And I consider civil rights to be actually a pretty new thing. Do not think that. Do not think that. By the way, do not think that civil rights is something that's not up for conversation. That will absolutely be up for conversation if things continue the way they are.
I mean, paradigmatically too. Like, you talked about like, do the false assumptions apply to us, or does the Britain-France distinction apply to us? Civil rights is a French conception. It is not an American conception. It is not an English conception. Civil rights, like, I enjoy most aspects of the world that the Civil Rights Act of 1965 or
it's a good compromise.
1964 created. Yeah. I enjoy most aspects of it. Civil rights is an alien innovation, and it goes against the sort of the underlying principles of most of our constitutional order.
Well, it's
I will freely admit that I enjoy it, and it is probably not consistent.
Correct. Same here. Yeah. For me, civil rights is,
The Civil Rights Act of 1964 was at least the second refounding of America, because you have one in 1865 with
correct.
1860s with Abraham Lincoln, and then you have the Civil Rights Act. Our country's actually been through like many, larvae becoming butterfly stages here. So
which might be healthy, actually. I don't hate it.
It is. And like every time we talk about in DMs, honestly, any subject about like cultural transmission, I go out of my way to mention the word renewal.
And that's why you
transform as you exist.
That's why you glommed onto the phrase I think I once said. I don't even remember which video I said it in, like moral awakening. Is that what happens once in a while, is that we decide that we need to reform the way we are. And America does reform. And much to the chagrin of many, some present company maybe included, the woke reform of America has completely fucking failed. Like it fucking got belly flopped to the point where everyone's distancing themselves away from it. And I think if they put AOC as the front runner for 2028, it's going to be just so they can have time to I've seen this before.
It belly flopped. Like give the devil his due. It belly flopped through the diligent work of people like James Lindsay, who sought to name it, identify it, and brand it.
It took a lot of work to belly flop it. Like it took a lot of work to like drop bombs on Nagasaki and Hiroshima as well. But it blew them the fuck out hard, and it's got to the belly flop. It to me is definitive, right? Like if they put AOC on as 2028, what they're going to be doing is they're going to be putting the woke up on a pedestal so it can be shot to shit, so they can like regroup themselves. Which is what I would do.
You think it's we'll just seed another 4 years in order to get licensed to conduct a full internal purge?
Correct. I would do it. That's what I would do.
I would too.
You have to definitively destroy. You have to definitively destroy the part of you that's killing you. Like you.
Yeah. When I saw Ezra Klein and his co-author on whatever the American Abundance book is, I was like, okay, I disagree with you guys on
joke, by the way.
Some of your components of this like economically don't fit together, but like this is a message that resonates. Like if Democrats gave up their woke stuff, they would actually be an electoral threat and like jumped on American Abundance, even if it's not entirely coherent. If they jumped on American Abundance, like you guys would be a going political threat in a serious way.
Well, that's what Trump does a lot of times. He just grabs stuff that they would normally be in favor of, to the point where Trump's executive order.
People are calling Ezra Klein a Trumper for this. It's bro.
Who's the Senate majority? Was it the Senate or the House majority? Or who is the Democrat that's foreign name?
Senate was Schumer.
Not Schumer. Okay, who's the House? Who's the House minority leader?
Was Pelosi. It's fuck me, I don't remember.
It's a foreign name. Like what? Anyways, this guy who's got a sort of Indian name. I apologize, John Hansi. I'm trying not to be racist.
Ro Khanna?
Oh, I don't remember if that's. No, I don't think it's him.
No, anyways, it's not Ro Khanna.
This guy pledged to put whatever Trump put into law.
Hakeem Jeffries.
Hakeem Jeffries. That's the one. I'm so sorry. Hakeem Jeffries was saying he's going to put in the Trump prescription, like most favored nation thing, into law. So they finally started just like endorsing this. So Trump has been cribbing from them so much, which, by the way, Trump is just a 90s Democrat. Okay.
Yeah. Super duper.
Like technically
his policy positions in Bill Clinton's, aside from like, aside from the whatever the big international trade deal was that Clinton had that was controversial, rioting in Seattle in the 90s. Aside from that, they're like policy wise the same.
It's kind of funny because like Trump is also like the major, like the most successful pusher of Democrat policies. Probably pre-Obama. I don't even know if other than the Affordable Care Act, which was a disaster for health insurance costs.
Well, the remarkable thing is like he's pushing the positions the Democrats used to have, but like we were talking about with slavery, it's like the Democrats moved away from unions and are very much the pro-slave policy again. We just
foreigners who come in here undocumented. By the way, employers by the way, and to show what's going on,
fucking love it if they're not morally scrupulous.
There is no, by the way, checks and balances on employers and how they treat undocumented illegal immigrants, which means the slave stuff continues. You want
100%.
Which by the way, like having some personal insight into the slave trade into America, the slavers really like the Democrats a lot, and Trump is scaring them shitless right now. Mm-hmm. The Dems have no way. There's no path there. I don't understand. Like they're just trying to like allow people in here to be taken advantage of, or to take advantage of locals, push wages down, and allow slavery to occur. I have seen slave wages. I have seen actual slavery. I've seen people take advantage of illegals. Like, because all I have to do is threaten them. Like saying La Migra and like making fun, like having a funny prank on the Mexican immigrants is not something that's new. That's been around for like a decade plus, like going around a construction site and shouting La Migra from your bicycle. I never did it because I actually kind of like the Mexicans. But like, it's been a thing. Mm-hmm. Anyways, like keeping things under control. Like there's a difference between like moral chaos. Let me put it this way. There is no difference to me from moral chaos from amoral order. They always end in the subjugation of peoples.
Yeah.
So like, to think that you're anything special is insane to me. And to think that you have a different alternative. And the thing is, the American people, to their credit, are wanting some sort of ordered credit, whereas like immigrants can come into the country, they just have to do it right.
Yeah.
Like my dad did. Took him a hot minute. He had to marry one of your grenades. Sorry. She was a single mom. My dad brought a single mom off the street, raised her kid, and then had a bunch more kids. He paid his dues.
Man,
we should probably end pretty soon, but like, yeah.
I think part of the reason why like this discussion is relevant and why diving into the history. And by the way, I'm with you. Like, I would love to do the critiques, the examination of the
let's hit James Lindsay and then hit like Sargon. That'd be funny. It's like
I think that's the correct order. But
okay.
I mean,
all right.
I think the reason this is relevant is it's right there in the Declaration of Independence. We are the group of people who broke bonds of association with another group of people. We're the English people who broke away because we were mistreated by the other English people. And in many ways, like, we've adapted, we've evolved, we've grown into our own, we've conquered a continent, etc. And by the way, both of our families arrived in this country long after that declaration was written. But we're a nation of Calvin Robinsons in that sort of sense. Like, we are people who buy into this history, this way of existence, who we are, what we do, and want to make it better. This is relevant to us because, despite being far newer than that, we are both American Englishmen in a way,
Yeah, we are in a way. And the problem is the English is they think that we are English. We are American. And that leads. I think I forget which intellectual. Gosh, I'm terrible at names. This intellectual, the English intellectual, wanted to bring America back into the fold. I think if it wasn't World War I, it was World War II. It was like America will never join the fold. We left for a reason. We were one peoples against another peoples that declared independence, and we have a certain value system. Which, by the way, saying that people are born equal is an absolute middle finger to the blue-blooded royal class, let alone the king. That is like saying like if you were a Catholic colony that we just don't recognize the Pope, that all people before God, like all men who prayed in Christ's name, are equal before God, which is another subject. Which always I think is funny. The American identity. I actually got blocked by Aaron McIntyre because I mentioned like an American conservatism versus a European conservatism. That American conservatism is very non-ethnic and it's mostly about what the American values are. We in defiance of what Sargon will say, like Carl Benjamin would say, we are actually a propositional nation that does build sentiment, and we are cohesive. I have a video that's on the way that's called The Delusions of Albion, where I pretty much dissect their culture and destroy it. Because like they think they're high trust. They're not high trust at all. They think
that's
were they ever? I'm going to question that because there were always lying sons of bitches. It was just a certain.
This is revisiting like the destruction, like the willful destruction of the bottom quintile conversation. At least that's where my mind goes.
Right. Well, I think to me the English are unable to reintegrate their shadow self. So they are unable to see themselves in reality. So they bring themselves up onto a pedestal, which inevitably gets chopped down. Like to say they're a high trust society is like, okay, are you women high trust? Because as soon as I say like, how many men have your women slept with? It's like, well, they're just going to lie to you. I was like, well, that's not very high trust. Well, how about the BBC? How about your media and your presenters and your journalists? Well, they're not very high trust. Well, how about your noblemen? Well, they're not very high trust. Who's the high trust one? It's just your working class men. That's it. That's the only high trust. In which case, a one-way trust route is actually just obedience, not trust. If my dog trusts me, even if I throw him into the forest to fend for himself, I don't trust him. I don't want him around. I'm going to take advantage of him.
There's a great Eric Weinsteinism in this. The proposed cultural values of any period are the cover story for the great theft of that period.
Yes. The I call it the funhouse mirror of history, is that people tend to look at the exception rather than the rule. In a time of debauchery, you're going to have tons of sermons on virtue and purity. So you're going to look back at those like writings and you're going to see virtue and purity. It's like, no, like the Victorian period is hilarious to me because they're like, oh, the Victorians were this way. It's like, really? Is that the Victorians you knew? Because my ancestors knew about like boatloads of illiterate, syphilitic, violent, drunken men who would get off the boat, cause trouble. Like, you don't think about the boxing match. Like, pugilism was also like a discipline back in those days, and they had to outlaw eye gouging and other like things to form the sport of boxing. It's like, no, there's filth. It's like modern day in like the worst things you see in India were probably happening in like Victorian London. It was like just crap everywhere. It was not like the orderly thing that they put it out to be.
I'll give you that, along with most of the most exotic nipple piercing arrangements were invented by and pursued by Victorian women of good esteem.
Fucking awesome.
Now consider this.
I want to be born in Victorian period for a completely different reason than most people say, because those ladies had something pent up.
Hypocrisy is considered the great moral sin because it is the most easily graspable.
Yep.
Hypocrisy is essentially the ultimate moral standard because it is the moral standard most easily understood by the stupid. It is not the only moral standard, nor is it the ultimate moral standard. In order, and like, we don't really have time to justify this here, but I'm just going to say it. In order to have a sophisticated, functioning society, your society also needs to develop a certain level of ability to accept hypocrisy.
Oh,
it needs to be gated, it needs to be controlled, but hypocrisy is not the ultimate moral sin. Treachery is.
Correct. Yes. This is the Asian thing of like having the face, and there was a word for what's behind the face, but like having the face, which is what is morally acceptable in the public eye, right? Like, okay, you have a mistress. Don't ever talk about it publicly. Never talk about it to anyone, in fact, but just have your mistress and shut your mouth about it. Because if you start making it normal, that's the bad thing. However, if you decide to leave your wife, that is horrendous. That's actually way worse than having a mistress. That's what would happen in Asia, right? Like to sin is normal. To make mistakes and do things that are bad is actually just human. And I think hypocrisy is actually fairly human. Like
inevitably.
We absolutely, all of us want to have we have a perfect person in our brain, and we fail to reach it. And I think maybe this is why the West is always losing itself and having revolutions, is that we have an idealization of what the perfect person is. And it's like, okay, he's up here and we can never really reach it. Like, you don't have to flagellate yourself because you fail to attain the thing that you know you should do. Like, although there is a certain authenticity to it, but it's like, I don't know. It's the self-focus. It should drive people to focus on their own problems rather than policing each other. I think that's the problem that you have, is when you start policing each other. But like,
to be hypocritical is human. To normalize is satanic, just to give you a little inversion there.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. Like, people are going to do things that are bad, and that's the expected human condition, which is actually a very Christian value, which a lot of modern day Christians and Christian nationalists will deny. Like this war on pornography is like funny to me. Is like, I want to see all your browser's history. I want to like with the stuff that sniffs out what you do in private. I would love to see that.
So yeah, like the browser history is fine. The normalization of pornography is how we got fucked. Like that's how porn went absolutely.
It should be private. It should be private.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It should absolutely be a matter of private moral hypocrisy. You should be called a sinner for it, and you should probably do it, but it should never be normal. By the way, John V's last comment fucking killed it.
There's a line in the book I read. Oh yeah, let me put it up. I'm so sorry. There's a line in the book. There's something like, sometimes a hypocrite is only someone who is in the process of change. Yeah, exactly, absolutely. We absolutely make mistakes. Like, I have fallen asleep when I should be working while I was driving others to stay awake. Right. And it's like, changing your mind is not about just changing your opinion. Like, I want to delve into the, I know we're like over time, so we're just bullshitting now, but changing your mind goes way beyond just changing your professed belief. Changing your mind is actually a really difficult process. Like, I went through it when me and my wife had a bunch of strife, and she actually left the house because I was extremely driven, and it was to a bad degree. Whereas, like, I looked at the entire world as productivity units. I saw everything as like, what have you done for me lately? And what are you doing? And are you hitting your goals and all that stuff? I was basically being a manager, and it sucked. It sucked for me and it sucked for her. And she wisely left for a while to go stay with her friend. And it forced me to sit there with like an open door with no one in it. And I was like, oh shit, maybe the way I'm thinking about things is wrong. And I just spent 3 days just living life, and at the end of it I was like, what is important? Is it not the people that we have in our lives and the importance thereof? And then I've completely changed. Just completely changing your mind is a violent process.
Yeah, and you have to burn an immense amount of earned social capital for actually no gain other than freedom. You and in order to change your mind, you have to kind of become like, Jabal ibn Tariq or Hernan Cortez and burn your ships.
Right. There's a commitment.
It's a heroic endeavor.
And what I want, I hate, you noticed this before we had a conversation, is that what I don't hate racism, and I don't hate. What I hate is when it comes to a lack of agency. When you start hating someone else so that you don't have to do something. That's what I actually hate, because I think if you force yourself to have agency over your life and accountability, you eventually reconcile all those things that you previously hated and just realize that they are a part of the game, they're a part of you, and you were a reflection of it. What I want Americans to do,
I hate the N's and the J's, and they're making my life miserable.
Yeah,
it's like, well, guess what, buddy? Everybody has to deal with N's and J's, including N's and J's. So, like, whose fault is it that you're a failure? It ain't the N's and J's, it's yours.
Super high agency people will ask them, like, I think you said this in a tweet a little while ago, is that there's a difference between I shouldn't have to live like this and I'm not going to live like this. It's like you have to have like personal ownership of how you live. So these people who were blaming outsiders left and right, by the way, left and right, the extreme, do this. Luckily, the American norm doesn't really. Is like, okay, you got N's over here doing something, you got J's over here doing something. What does that have to do with you? What does that have to do with you not being able to find a girl that you can marry? Okay, none of that's stopping you from founding a legacy. And maybe it's making it harder, but like, how easy do you want it? Right? Like, how easy do you need it? How much difficulty are you willing to put up with? Like, if I was to bring someone from the Great Depression up to now, or like the Great Depression, they were using slingshots to kill squirrels and eat them, which, by the way, in Appalachia, squirrel gravy is still a thing people eat, like, voluntarily. It's like, okay, tell this person your excuse. The left and the right need to stop blaming everybody else and to start seeing themselves in the equation of how their life is gone.
Yep.
Which, by the way, would bring us to absolute liberalism. Classical liberalism.
Yeah, man, we've hit so much here. Like, I feel like we went through the topic, but like we opened and dropped way more bookmarks than we
did a tour of Italy. It was pretty bad. We didn't go very deep on anything, but we went deep on some stuff. But honestly, I think like this is. I mean, I've been tentative to bridge it as a possible topic, but I think we are really hitting on like the mother load issue here. Like, we've been kind of like, panning for the easy gold, but this is really where most of the mess is. So where do you see the next step? Which thing would you like to discuss with first? A critique of Lindsay, critique of, like, where do you see it? What's the focal point that you think is going to hit it hardest?
I mean, I feel like Lindsay is almost clearing up mess more than mining.
I don't like to clear up mess. Like,
I don't like to either.
Yeah, I don't. By the way, this is the least favorite thing I have about video essayists is when they start arguing against a position that nobody even gives a shit about. I was like, like you've made this critique, nobody cares. We're moving on. They've made a bunch of noise. You don't have to make noise back. Like every screech in the forest, you don't have to screech back at it. Like what's going to get us the most truth? I guess.
I think that's probably going into the Benjamin stuff, and then if we have to deal with Lindsay stuff, maybe.
I think Lindsay's done a pretty good, yeah.
But that's also like stuff that's out there in the zeitgeist. Like talking about the agency conversation, that's a conversation that's had not often enough.
I'm gonna have to derive the origin, by the way, of East Asian agency. Like, it's not clear to me how Confucianism and Taoism built into, and then an eventual conversion to Christianity.
Yeah. Wait, Taoism is wild because it's like an insanely non-agentic philosophy. Like they're so close on so many things, and it's, essentially a philosophy of quietism. Confucianism is wrong about a shitload of things, aside from maybe outside of chiefly Confucian culture in Asia, but it's insanely agentic. So it's like, oh, Confucianism is the one that succeeds because it's the one that urges you to take action.
Well, that's also actually a metaphysical thing to touch on, is like, what's more important, an agency of a dishonest agency or an honest lack of agency, right? Like sometimes being like extremely stupid, but thinking you have control gives you way more control than being extremely smart and then knowing the truth of your situation.
I mean, you've essentially described a quadrant there that also encompasses in it as like a little enclave, beginner's mind. So,
yeah, I'm extremely stupid, but also like have high agency. So I like to not play the hatchling, but I actually am the hatchling. So it's kind of fun to like have these ideas run across me first, which is why I have you on here, is like someone who's read through this stuff and understands it. How does it hit like someone who's never heard of it before? Like, does it what is my visceral reaction to, is like an American with my background? But luckily, like for me, I'm a pretty blank slate American, is that I would more, if you gave me a button that said like destroy the rightmost 10% of people and the leftmost 10% of people, I wouldn't want a second button. I don't know if I'd hit it, but I wouldn't want a second one. I'm like, yeah, I kind of hate both these. I kind of think they both suck. But that's because of the lack of agency. And both of them, anyways. Okay. Maybe we'll hit on agency and what makes that. Lib for Life actually pops in here and says, like, isn't agency a liberal concept? That's an interesting question. Do you want to address that?
Is agency a liberal concept? Do you mean that it's historically mediated by the emergence of liberal ideas?
I mean, people had
maybe as we discuss it in English, is it a historically, like, is it a liberalism mediated concept in human existence? No, obviously, fuck off, not.
Right. People had
and most of Greek philosophy was concerned with recontextualizing metaphysics to create a high agency culture. Like literally their concept of time, which you can see described in what is it? The Titanomachia and the emergence of, Greek mythology through to the order of Zeus. Like the Greeks are in the process, very pre-liberal people, of literally reconfiguring the universe into a way that says be high agency, including their conception of time, which has future as the origin point of everything, flowing into present, leaving past as Greeks artifacts or detritus.
The Greeks are wilding out. I have no idea.
Future.
What the fuck?
It turns out
shit I've ever heard.
If you're looking for a conception of time, yeah, in the physics sense, like past leads to present leads to future.
Right, but for them,
in a material sense, useful. If you are looking to have an effective life that makes you happy, the ancient Greek conception of time is literally better than everything else that exists.
Well, yeah. Okay. So does it suppose
agency is an ancient concept?
Okay. That's actually kind of interesting, like the delving into agency. By the way, for all these early conversations me and Cosma have, it kind of directs what's going on. So we're right now just like a stone skipping across a lake, like seeing where we want to be in the depths. Like we get this tiny glimpse of depth to where we are, and we're kind of trying to decide where we want to go into depth, because we could probably just do an entire conversation of what is agency, right? Like and how does that affect? And my question is, why has Gen Z lost agency? Because it seems that they have. But anyways,
that's an interesting one too. Actually, we didn't get to that in the generation war, and it's super interesting how and why they lost it.
I feel bad for him, and I also feel like I want to smash them with my sandal.
Honestly, I feel guilty, and I want to steal their lunch money.
My Mongol heritage is like, I must ride over them. I resist. Like, oh, I kind of like them, and I want to like ride over them with a pony and a lash, and just clown on them. Yeah, it's so bad. It's so bad. We'll settle it in CS:GO. Anyways, guys, I have to end it there because we're so over. We're so over. We're so good.
We're almost over. 3 hours when we're supposed to be like hour and a half, 2.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I'm gonna hit the end stream button, and it's just gonna keep talking while we're going while we're continuing to talk about this subject to try and organize our thoughts, because these thoughts are live for life. I actually want to thank you for being here. Minus the like incredible Spurgouts, you've actually had like some gems of really interesting thoughts. Which is, by the way, 90% of a person. He's
like the liberal Fed posting opposite of a libertarian
it's
guy.
It's actually kind of fascinating.
It's like a dark mirror.
I can't stop it. I got to look at it, right? Like, because sometimes there's like a really coaching thought. I was like, wait, oh shit. Also, I love supposing the opposite and then finding, and then that sort of de-extremifies me. Like, I'll just suppose that I'm a black nationalist for a day. I was like, what do I think? Oh, okay. Well, a lot of things start to make a lot of sense, actually. And it turns out it's the exact same stuff the white nationalists want. So I just remain brown and out.
Brown and out.
Brown and out. I looked out of my hermit shell and I saw nothing good, and I went back inside. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Cosmo, I'll chill out and talk with you. Feelings mutual, libs for life. Feel free to subscribe, pop in. We try to do this every other Thursday, but I got sick on Thursday, so I was bedridden, so I couldn't pop on. But Thursday at 3 p.m. is when we usually do this. All right. Peace.